Now, this one is going to be a lot of fun, I believe. Speculation, as one Doug Heffernan might say. Appreciate you being here, the voice of college football. It's the Big Ten Live Show. It's Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So I could probably just have said, hey, folks, it's Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And you would respond by saying, of course it is. It's the Big Ten Live Show. Because that's what we do each and every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for stopping by at the Voice of College Football. It's good to be here. It's good to be seen. And we will recognize all of you. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. Okay, Amazon links in the description section of all the videos, every single video, every live stream. The Amazon link in the description section. Actually, I have got it. It is the most important note of the night. It has nothing to do with realignment, Notre Dame, or anybody else. The most important note of the night right here, top line, Amazon, and we will give you a better tutorial on how to use the Amazon link at some point in the show. How about that? Of course, we've got our official X account. That would be Twitter to some of you. Our official account has been revised and relaunched. They have kicked me to the side. I'm no longer front and center. No, it's all college football all the time for all of you. So dig in and enjoy. And we've got a post from here in the past 24 hours that we'd like to highlight tonight. Keep in mind here, the Voice of College Football, the schedule includes the Clemson All-In show that is going on right now with Tiger Paw Craven and Jordan Bowman. That is the Clemson show going on right now. We've got West Virginia and USC on tap. But let's get to the news of the day. Or it's not news, it's speculation. Speculation, Mark. I have stated over the past 2 weeks, as we have enjoyed realignment weeks, could be 3, could be 4. I don't know how long we're going to take it. I've got a couple more ideas for realignment videos. One in particular is going to be my grand scheme of 72 divided by 12. That's going to be 6 conferences, 12 teams in each league. That is the way it should be, 72 teams involved. Never going to happen, but we're going to cap off realignment weeks with my version of what college football should look like. But we've got some other videos to provide. We've got a couple looks that are coming up here. Tony Syracuse, the last word on college football. We'll release that in the next couple of days. And enjoy all the videos. We looked at the Big 12, the possibilities of the Big 12 going forward. We've only looked at one possibility. We should look at others based on what we're going to discuss tonight. Okay, so let's get to it. So there are sources out there. There are sources, and then there are sources. And I think some are credible. Some are not. Some have some level of credibility. And it's difficult to determine which is which sometimes. When I see something out of Ross Dellinger or Pete Thamel, or there's a few others I can't think of right this second, I tend to believe that they know what they're talking about. And if their lead turns out to go south, which if we combed through their articles and their Twitter X posts over the years, we would find many times that those guys have led us astray. That is not a knock on them. Many times, most times, that's legitimate. It's a situation in which it's a fluid situation, and they are providing for us the latest knowledge that they have, but those powers that be can change their minds. Or there could be other circumstances involved that come to light that they were unaware of. Okay, so just because a source eventually is incorrect doesn't mean that they're not credible. It's just like me not predicting a football game correctly. We're all going to miss predictions. So you can't say, oh, that guy missed that prediction, or his record this week was 9-12. He sucks. He doesn't know what he's talking about. No, you need to watch week after week after week after week after week. And then you put it all together. So in terms of sources, I saw this and I would like to be able to tell you where I saw it because I want to credit sources. But you know what? It turned out to be that none of them were true sources. They were just sites that over the last couple weeks were throwing out a lot of talk concerning Notre Dame, Florida State, Clemson, and others. And I went to CBS Sports. I went to a number of other college football news. I would have to get on my history and just kind of go through to tell you exactly where I went. So on one hand, I always give sources, but in this case, I'm not going to give sources. Number one, because I didn't write them down. Number two, because they are not legitimate. They are not, to our discussion, needed or necessary because I'm not citing them. I did not get any information from anyone that was new information to me and to us in our discussion. So hopefully that makes sense. But I checked probably 15 different places, did all sorts of Google searches, Notre Dame realignment, Florida State realignment, Notre Dame Big Ten, all of that, ACC, to gather what is connected to the Big Ten first and foremost, because this is the Big Ten live show. And so I will kind of go down some different paths of what is being talked about, what is being speculated about. One source that I will give, because this one is clear, at least in the time being, that I did see, that wasn't just kind of kicking around this notion and that notion, but Greg Swaim, who we've had on here once for sure, maybe twice, here at the Voice of College Football. I know that he had a number of posts that I referenced in kind of gathering, okay, is there anything out there that is substantial? Is there anything substantiated, I should say? Because we've stated from the beginning of all this realignment shakeup throughout college football over the past couple of years, going back to OU and Texas, that generally we talk about it here at the Voice of College Football based on two situations. The first one, hook 'em. The first one would be, number one, when there's actually news. Of course, if there's news, we are the place to be. We will be right here. I believe that's when you really need to be here, is when we've got news, because we don't need to speculate. We know what the news is, and then we will break it down. We will debate it. We will discuss it. We will analyze it, and we will use our resources that include all of you as the Voice of College Football, the Voice of College Football here, and we will analyze it and do as good a job as anybody in understanding the sport and understanding the landscape to talk about what that means and how it looks going forward. The other second time in which we take off on realignment is when somebody of note, somebody important that has influence, not talking about a writer, media person, Pat McAfee saying something. No. I'm talking about when somebody, most recently, the best example I can come up with would be the North Carolina athletic director stating, we need to leave the ACC. Seems pretty forthright, seems pretty direct. We need to leave the ACC, quote, and he expounded upon it beyond that. Now, we are at the cusp of media days. We just saw the Big 12 conclude this last week, and I was on the verge of tearing into Brett Yormark's comments at Big 12 Media Days. But because of some scheduling changes in my schedule, first and foremost, but also after assessing what he had to say and assessing the landscape and what could be in motion, I thought, okay, I'm going to hold back here. I'm going to hold back on poor Brett. I had a lot of good things to say about him. I also had some things to say about him that weren't necessarily favorable based on his continued approach to ignoring the state of the Big 12. the position, let's say, of the Big 12, not the state of the Big 12. The Big 12 is in a pretty good state right now, but the condition of the Big 12 or the status of the Big 12 against the SEC and the Big 10. However, I will credit him as doing just about everything he possibly can right now to correct that as much as possibly it can be corrected. So let's get to the matters at hand involving the Big Ten and what is being rumored. Okay. And again, I am breaking my own rule, and we're discussing this because there is so much out there involving and so many moving parts. And really, considering how the sport is consolidated, think about this. 1 year ago, we had 5 conferences. So, and this was before, and OU Texas was already announced, USC, UCLA, Washington. So there were more possibilities for movement, exponentially more chess pieces to be moved or that could be moved. Now the sport is consolidated into 4 conferences, and basically one of them is considered a dead man walking, the ACC. I don't completely subscribe to that notion, and we may get to that as well, but let's get back to the Big Ten at hand. It's pretty fascinating right now, the number of options out there, considering that the total number of options has been reduced, that there are a lot of things on the table that could change this sport dramatically. Not that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to tumble, but the Big 12 possibly is an opportunity to be a real player here. The ACC is an opportunity to go away or to be at least fortified and to do something similar to what the Big 12 has been able to do in sustaining its league. So let's start with the kingpin in all of this, and that's Notre Dame. Everybody wants Notre Dame. Notre Dame is by far the number one property out there. It's not close. They are coveted, warranted. Everybody wants Notre Dame. Okay. Now, when the ACC was on good footing, there were people out there that believed that Notre Dame would eventually, in football, land in the ACC because of that obvious relationship that they had already dived in with all the other sports. They are a full-fledged voting member of the ACC. How crazy is that? Notre Dame has a full vote. They have the same amount of power in that boardroom, technically. Now, we would have to be in the boardroom to actually see it play out among members of the ACC presidents and athletic directors, but technically they've got the same power as Florida State, Clemson, on down the line all the way to Wake Forest and Syracuse. So that was a good deal that they struck in regards to maintaining their independence, but also getting into the ACC and all these other sports that benefit all their other sports, but they could stay out in football. Well done, Notre Dame. You continue to get your way. All right, so Notre Dame is the prized possession here. I thought it was rather funny in one of these articles that I cited. And again, once I got into all these articles, it wasn't like they could say, oh, this person of substance, this president, this AD gives us a hint, or this is being done, or did you consider? It was all just regurgitating what we already know. But let's understand, Notre Dame wants to stay independent. They truly want to stay independent. They have made this extremely clear. Even the college football playoff at this point is somewhat, I don't want to say stacked against them, but they do not have the opportunity to be a top 4 seed, yet that doesn't seem to have moved them. The Big Ten and the SEC have cut media deals that have raised the level of the media revenue way past Notre Dame. This has not seemed to move Notre Dame. And again, if I was a Notre Dame supporter, if I was somebody of significance within the Notre Dame community, I would be right there with you. I believe I would be. Don't be in a conference. Be independent. Be special. Be special. There is something to that. There is something that makes Notre Dame different than everyone else. And we know what that is. They are not in a conference. And they will, for as long as they can hang on to that, they will be separate in some people's minds from everybody else in college football. Regardless of their record that particular year, how good their team is, there will be something separate, and to some people, something special. Of course, the Notre Dame fans, they're going to be considered special. But even to the average college football fan, Notre Dame means something special. I can't be any more vague than that, I realize. But if you've been watching the sport for a considerable amount of time, you know what I mean. That may wear off through the generations as people my age, and I'm going to die when I'm about 120, so it's going to be a while, but all right, so Notre Dame holds the power. So at least to date, they have shown that this money disparity does not faze them. I don't know if they will start to do better accounting and figure 3-4 years from now that, wow, we're behind 30 or 40 million a year, and this is catching up to us. We need to do something. And that is worth losing this special place that we have in this independence. But right now, why would Notre Dame join a conference? They are sovereign. They have autonomy. They make their own decisions. Notre Dame, I'm sure, does not want to sit in a boardroom with the likes of Purdue and Illinois and have to wrestle with 18, 19, 20 other voices about what's going to be done in that conference. Schedule the way they want, say we're special, and continue to latch on to that. Like they've never stated that themselves, but the way they talk and when they tout their independence, basically what they're telling everyone is we are special. They'll not be able to do that anymore. That will cease to be. So they're hanging on to dear life to do that. I have for a long time wanted college football to do something about that. Well, of course, my desire has fallen on deaf ears because who is college football? College football does not exist. It's not the NFL. But maybe we're taking steps toward there being a college football league like the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL, and it would most likely be controlled, at least as it stands right now, by the SEC and the Big Ten. And it would be my recommendation, as it has been for years and years and years and years, as we have stated here many times, to force Notre Dame to join a conference. The problem there is if there is not a college football league that has interest for everyone across the board, then Notre Dame's necessarily not going to be placed where they should be placed. It's going to be this power struggle between the Big Ten and the SEC. It's not like if the SEC and the Big Ten join forces and own college football and rule college football and generally have a 50-50 partnership of sorts, what do they do with Notre Dame? I don't think the SEC is just going to flat out give them Notre Dame and say, this is what's best for college football. There you go. Unless they got something in return that would balance out the loss. Notre Dame belongs in the Big Ten. For so many reasons we've discussed many times, and maybe some recent news has given us indication that Notre Dame is preparing for that move. I don't know if it tells us anything or not that they have gotten back into contract with Michigan. They just signed a contract with Michigan State just in the last week. They are playing Purdue, I believe, 5 consecutive seasons, and that has just been contracted in the last year or two. I don't know if that tells us anything or not. But Notre Dame, I think, is going to have to be forced. Either the money and the weight of the sport and the conditions, the benefits are going to have to be so skewed against them to force them, or it's just going to have to be a mandate from the league. You want to play big time football, you want to play in the college football playoff, you got to join a league. There will be 69 teams playing power conference football if we include Washington State and Oregon State, and then there's Notre Dame. They're all by themselves. So get in a league, but I do not expect Notre Dame to make that decision. I might be wrong. They did pretty well in the college football playoff revenue distribution. They had $12 million regardless. So Notre Dame could not go to the college football playoff year after year after year after year. And if they run into another Charlie Weiss or Bob Davie, then they'll still get their payout every year. So that's a pretty good deal. Paul Finebaum said this week, it's reported, I did not hear it directly from him, but it's being reported, that Paul Finebaum said this week that Notre Dame's going to be in the Big Ten. Now, do I find that to be a credible source? Yes and no. If Paul Finebaum gives me some kind of analysis on the football field, I completely discard it. No. He has shown me time and time again that he doesn't really understand what's going on the field. Okay. Number two, if he says something concerning personnel in college football, meaning players, evaluations, and so forth, again, don't listen to Paul Finebaum. However, the man has connections. He works for a particular network that kind of owns the sport. They own the playoff up until this year, and they still have a large chunk of it. So he's got connections. He knows people. He's been in the sport a long time. I have certain levels of respect for him because I do think he's a journalist and has proven himself in the past, and he's got connections. And so if he is flat out saying that Notre Dame's going to be in the Big Ten at some point, then I think that means something. Let's understand that if something doesn't happen right now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to happen. We learned our lesson a few months ago, or let's see, when was that? That would have been, did we learn our lesson? Man, time flies. A year ago and a couple months ago, I guess it would have been early 23. For about 6 months, Oregon and Washington stated what? They wanted to be in the Big Ten. They applied for the Big Ten. And after I hit this point, I will acknowledge some of the folks in the chat here. So anyway, Oregon and Washington applied for the Big Ten. So, of course, they want to be in the Big Ten. What did the Big Ten do? Didn't say anything about it. Didn't acknowledge it publicly. We didn't know what was going on. And the longer time lapsed, it appeared for a while that the Big Ten doesn't like, or we could go to so many sites and so many writers, so many analysts who were out there saying, it's not going to happen. Not going to happen. Look, Oregon, Washington, they've made themselves available. Big Ten obviously does not want them. Now, did the Big Ten know all along we are taking Oregon and Washington? But there are a few things that need to clear through. Or was the Big Ten checking with Notre Dame first? I can about guarantee that that was part of it, that the Big Ten was checking with Notre Dame. They're checking with Notre Dame on every stop. Okay, Notre Dame, you ready to join? You sure? You're not? Okay, what about this? What about that? Okay, you're not? Okay, we're going to move on to USC and UCLA. We're going to move on to Oregon and Washington. But that sat there for 7 or 8 months. Oregon, Washington having just basically stated, hey, we're applying for the Big Ten. We want to be in the Big Ten. And the Big Ten, silent. Then, okay, it happened. And again, maybe part of that time was negotiations because they only received half of a revenue share coming into the league. Maybe that had to be negotiated. Maybe, again, it was a Notre Dame component. Maybe there were other things involved. We don't know. I do know that while I am in no way any predictor of any of this stuff, and I have never claimed to be, I at least propose things that make sense. And some people don't agree with them. Sometimes I get nasty comments that say, I don't know what I'm talking about, or that's not going to happen. Well, of course, it may not happen. But let's understand that many of these times I am just lining up candidates and letting you all know to get the discussion going. These are the candidates. This is how I would rank the candidates. This is maybe sometimes I take the approach. This is what I would do if I was the Big Ten. This is what I would do if I was the SEC or the Big 12. Understand when the Big 12 lost Oklahoma and Texas, it was this guy right here that came out with a video within days that said BYU, Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, those are your 4 best options out of the group of 5. Go get them. So sometimes I hit it, sometimes I don't, but I'm generally not making predictions or projections. I'm just saying these are possibilities. What do you think of this possibility? What do you think of that possibility? Or if this happens, this is how I believe this particular school would perform against the Big Ten or the SEC or the ACC, whomever. So we always do those. We've done breakdowns, so please check them out. We've done breakdowns of Stanford against the Big Ten, Cal against the Big Ten, Oregon against the Big Ten, Washington against the Big Ten. We did those way before Oregon and Washington ever joined the Big Ten. Florida State against the SEC in the Big Ten, Miami against the SEC in the Big Ten, North Carolina against the SEC in the Big Ten. You know, we look at past history, then we look at the trajectory and make approximations, strong approximations of how those football programs would fare in that proposed new conference. But it is somewhat interesting that way back 2 years ago that I put Notre Dame, Oregon, Washington, Stanford, Cal in the Big Ten. This was before it happened. I put those teams in the Big Ten. And we're the Big Ten with 18 teams. And again, I checked out a bunch of different sources today, and I'm not going to consider them sources today because, again, they didn't provide anything but speculation, just more speculation and talk. So I don't know where this is coming from originally. Again, the only person that I could find that stated bluntly and directly, I have sources, and this is what they're saying, is Greg Swain. But think about Notre Dame. If Notre Dame joins the Big Ten, so I've taken some ridicule about including Stanford. And again, these videos are 2 years old. The one on the top there with my new 21 team Big Ten, I was just saying this could happen. The one below it is just, you know, there was no projection that Colorado or Utah were going to the Big Ten by me. That was just me lining up the candidates and what they bring to the table. But again, I lined up a 21-team Big Ten with 7 teams in 3 divisions, and it worked out pretty well. And lo and behold, Notre Dame and Stanford were in that mix, along with the other ones that were added, Oregon, Washington as well. So now I'm seeing things out there about Notre Dame and Stanford joining the Big Ten. and think about the qualifications of Stanford. So we talked about Notre Dame. That's a slam dunk. They fit the bill in every such way. Historic brand, one of the blue bloods. Blue blood. That's a discussion right there. One of the blue bloods is Notre Dame, of course, and great academic institution, huge fan base, huge hater base. That's good too. Notre Dame. Before we continue with the Stanford conversation, we appreciate Daniel Henry being here, member for 15 months here at the Voice of College Football. Daniel, thank you so much for that. Hit the like. Notre Dame too scared to join the Big Ten. They would not be able to play a schedule like they're playing this season, that's for sure. Jackson is gifted a membership to the Voice of College Football. Appreciate that. You get the Discord link. You get a video per request each and every month. John doing a remarkable job on the Michigan channel. You got John, you got TJ, you got Ferris and company over on the Michigan channel. Check it out. It's a growing and thriving community there. John says, Prime Day in 4 days. Please use the Amazon link. Yeah, it's an easy deal. You grab the Amazon link and you subscribe here at the Voice of College Football. But the Amazon link is in the video, in the description section of all the videos. Grab the link and there you go. Same shopping experience, does not cost you a penny. So Stanford many times draws a lot of laughs because they suck at football. They suck right now in football, and they've got an empty stadium every Saturday. However, and they've already made their way to the ACC. Well, I don't know this to be substantiated, but I do not believe it to be a coincidence that Notre Dame, as I stated off the top and clearly explained, Notre Dame has full membership in the ACC, not in football, but in voting rights. And Notre Dame has a ton of influence. I can imagine, even though Notre Dame has the same voting rights as Wake Forest in the ACC boardroom, I'm going to guess people listen to Notre Dame a little bit more, even though they should listen to Wake Forest more because they've been around that conference since 1953. But they listened to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame found a landing spot. And I don't want to overstate this, that they were looking out for Stanford and Cal, and they died on the altar and sacrificed themselves for Stanford and Cal. No, but they certainly were a huge influence. They got Stanford and Cal into the ACC, found a spot for them there. Stanford is a world-class institution. I am not necessarily predicting that Stanford will land in the Big Ten, although at one point, as evidenced by the video, I proposed it and said, this makes sense. The Stanford athletic program is exceptional. The academics, oh my word. The money, the connections, the prestige of Stanford in the Big Ten. I just think that the Big Ten would be all over that. And again, they passed the first time. So I think many of us were caught in a thought pattern that, okay, well, maybe football does mean that much. And football meaning not football necessarily just on the field, football as it pertains to media rights, the football brand bringing eyeballs to the TV sets and the streaming devices. And a lot of people commented to that top video 2 years ago to say, Mark, the Big Ten's not going to have 21 teams because that's an odd number. Okay. Conferences will take the number of teams that they believe are beneficial to their product. And if they land on some odd number, I don't necessarily think that that's, I think that they would like for uniformity and for an easier scheduling formula, have a nice, neat 12, 16, etc. But the Big Ten played football from 1993 to 2014. What is that? 20 years, 21 years with 13 teams. I'm sorry, 11 teams. 11 teams from, let's see, until Nebraska joined in 2010, 2011. So I wouldn't get totally caught up in that it's got to be 16, it's got to be 20, got to be 24. They're sitting at 18. They've been at 11, 12, 14, and again, 11 for 20 years. And so Stanford, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I would not be surprised if Stanford's going to be in the Big Ten. The pluses far outweigh the negatives. And I understand they put a little bit of a drag on the TV revenue. I think more so, I think of empty stadiums. However, empty stadiums when Washington State comes to town and Oregon State comes to town and Arizona State. But when Ohio State comes to town, when Wisconsin comes to town, when Michigan comes to town, I don't think so. Let's not forget, Stanford can be excellent. This is not Wake Forest. This is not Northwestern. This is not Kansas. This is not Vanderbilt. This is not even Duke, who's been okay in football. Some of those schools that I just named have shown that they can be okay in football. No, Stanford was one of the top 5 teams in the country, generally from about 2009, 10 to 2015 or 16 for 5 or 6 years. And they've done it in the past. Is it automatic? No, they're not Oklahoma, but they can be that good in football. And maybe that move to the Big Ten would give them a kick in the pants to get their act together. So Stanford is an interesting, and I see in the chat that Stanford makes 0 cents. Well, that's just a ridiculous statement. They make 0 cents. Stanford could buy half these universities by themselves. All right. And then we've got this situation with Florida State and Clemson. And again, there's speculation out there. And where this is coming from, I don't know, because we just hear people repeating other people, I believe, unless some of the insiders that I mentioned off the top of the show, what I would consider insiders. And I got to say, I don't read their work. The one subscription I have, and I don't reference it as much as I should, is The Athletic. I think that The Athletic is the author of some ridiculously good, tight journalism and perspective. So I enjoy The Athletic, and I've got my subscription, and I do not reference it enough. I go weeks and weeks and weeks without even thinking about that they exist. And then I remember, and then I'm impressed, and I am glad that I checked out The Athletic. So maybe I should have done that before I jumped on here. With all due respect, and with crediting The Athletic course. So I'll give that a look a little bit later. So all these factors that we line up, do not look over any of these things. The Big Ten could be considering, they could be pausing. And wow, a college football map with Clemson and Florida State in the Big 12 would be so odd to me. But we've already reached that. Every time I say that about a particular school being placed in another conference, I think, man, that's strange. That just doesn't feel right, doesn't look right. It's already happened. If Stanford and Cal can be in the ACC, that has to be the biggest indictment against regionality in college athletics. And I don't know, I haven't looked into, nor do I, not that I don't care, I would be interested to see it, but I'm not going to do the research because I have other things to do, into what they are doing with all their other sports, Stanford, Cal, with the ACC. What kind of accommodations are they making? I don't know. I don't know if you can get away with, and you probably can in a sport like tennis, to just play regionally, stay home, and then have the ACC tournament, come out to Charlotte or wherever. So it's fun stuff. I would like for any of you to give me a call here at the Voice of College Football, and we will discuss everything I've thrown on the table and a zillion other things that I have not necessarily thought of. And there's probably about 1,800 things that I've thought of that I've forgotten to share, but I would love to hear from all of you. Check out our new look here at X. That would be the former Twitter, Voice of College Football. What do we think about Blue Bloods? We'll get back to the realignment talk if something else hits my mind or you guys bring up anything in particular. So leave your comments and questions there in the chat. If anything comes across, please get my attention. Blue Bloods. Who are Blue Bloods? What are Blue Bloods? So understand that when you now go to the Voice of College Football official X Twitter account, that this isn't necessarily coming from me. And if it's coming from me, you will see per Mark Rogers, because this is not just me. This is our official Voice of College Football Network account on Twitter. And so we've got our buddies TJ Ronan from the Michigan channel and Justin Adams from the Nebraska channel serving up their college football Blue Bloods. What is a Blue Blood? Got to start there. Every time we have these debates, is Clemson still relevant? Is Texas still, whether the term relevance thrown out or elite? Elite to me is the term that is easiest to define. Blue blood and all these other terms. Again, those seems to be the three. Blue blood, elite, relevant. I like that one. So-and-so is not relevant. Well, what are we talking about? Let's define that. So I always define the argument. I hate when people bring up arguments and then they meander all over the place and they go to different metrics and it's like, no. Let's define the argument. What's the argument? So here we go with Blue Bloods. What's a Blue Blood? All right, I'm going to go to the descriptions served up by our guys, TJ and Justin. Let's see what they have to say. Justin says, a Blue Blood is a program that has shown a history of dominance in college football over generations. Many factors go into becoming a Blue Blood, like national titles, wins, Heisman's, All-Americans, NFL draft picks, and more. This elite status is not fixed forever. You can fall from it or you can climb into it. Okay. That is one way to look at it. Then we've got Justin Adams. Please join Justin on the Nebraska channel. Quote, Blue Blood, by definition, references an early family history of higher status, regardless of the current status. The family will always be considered a Blue Blood. Therefore, due to these teams' decades of dominance through the early history of college football, they do not change, regardless of recent history. All right, so let's go to the chat. And before I give my perspective, you can put in the chat. Let's give each one word So his what's the key term in there that I saw from Justin? So is it a family origin or is it more elite? Meaning, I wish I could come up with I'm looking for like a buzzword from both sides to go with here. Does it have to do with a bloodline or does it change? So there's our buzz terms right there. So you tell me bloodline in the chat or it changes. Which is it? Bloodline means it doesn't change. Change means it does change. All right. Jason says blue blood, noble birth. Harry says 900 all-time wins is a blue blood. Well, there's a problem with that, Harry. It changes. 900 win. That criteria should change because then you're going to keep adding blue bloods. What are you going to estimate every year that should go up by 9? So next year it's 909. So I get your point. Harry says it changes. Todd says pre-60s. Dave, it slowly changes. Hummus Hero. Tom Selleck's a blue blood. Okay. It changes according to DDR 256. TJ says this season is going to be such a blast. Okay. I don't know what that means in terms of blue bloods. Edward says it changes slowly. Big Bumbo 22. Don't forget Oregon's a blue blood. Joe Long. I gave the best definition, Mark. Did you? Joe did. Wherever that is. So anyway. Hummus Hero. It was a TV show. All right. So here's my take on it. If you guys have noticed, no, Joe, I'm not going to read up. So if you've noticed, I don't use the term. I do not use the term blue blood. You never hear it out of my mouth unless somebody brings it up. Because number one, I don't care. I don't think it's really significant. And I don't like the thought that we're going to give status to something that's unchangeable. But you know what? I do believe it's unchanging because if we take the actual term blue blood, where's that derived from? The term blue blood. Maybe I would get a more favorable response if we were doing this and our target audience was in London. Blue blood means that there is an origin to it, that there is a history to it that dates back, and you can't change your bloodlines. They are unchangeable. They do not change. Therefore, you are either a blue blood or you are not a blue blood, and that will never change. There are blue bloods in reality, in this world, in everyday life, that are homeless on the street. But they're blue bloods. They're royalty. They just don't look like it. They don't act like it, but they're royalty. And of course, there are self-made millionaires and billionaires who came from nothing, from utter poverty, and they're anything but royalty, but they look like royalty. Blue bloods. Now the question is, let's say my definition or my perspective, I did not define it. My perspective is the one we're going to go with. Now, I've not answered the question, who is a blue blood and at what point did that start? Because if we want to take it all the way back to, and I'll catch this call in just a second, if we want to take it back, if we want to be technical about it, and we want to go back to the very origin of college football, there were no blue bloods because there was no, it's not like Princeton and Harvard invented the sport and said, we're only playing each other against each other because we are better than everyone else. And then it finally took off from there, and they're the blue bloods. So I believe you have to go back in time to a certain point. And let's understand, at the very beginning of college football, I hate to say this, I really don't hate to say it. The first 40 years of college football results, roughly, I'm speaking in rough terms, and there's not an exact date that I can say it suddenly became meaningful. But those score results, they're really not that legitimate. You're playing club teams. It was a club sport. If you're involved or have been involved in intramurals at your university or college, you were playing big time college football circa 1880. The results are really inconsequential except for keeping track. None of us could name any players pre 1910 or 15, and very few pre 1930-ish. It's not like baseball. Talking about baseball, do you know who Babe Ruth is? Do you know who Ty Cobb is? Walter Johnson, Grover Cleveland Alexander, Cy Young. I could go on and on. You know those people. They were playing the same sport they're playing today. There is very little difference. Now, you can talk about the quality of play increasing, improving. You look at a baseball field, look at Yankee Stadium. Look at Yankee Stadium in 1927 with Babe Ruth at the plate. They basically took the next Yankee Stadium and they put it right down on top of it. It's the same game. Therefore, you can reference Ty Cobb and Babe Ruth and all those guys. You can't do that in college football. Sure, we can. We total all the wins. They count. I give recognition to that. It's not like I cut off those wins and say I'm not going to count them. Yes, they count. But really, we have schools out there claiming national championships before we count forward passes. It's a bit silly and stupid. All right, let's get to so I don't know who to tell you is. I am not going to die on a hill with my listing of blue bloods, but I take it into the 1920s, 30s, in that range, when there were basically legitimate seasons played at that point. Notre Dame's a blue blood. Ohio State's a blue blood. Michigan's a blue blood. Alabama's a blue blood. Texas is a blue blood. Oklahoma's a blue blood. USC's a blue blood. Those 7, I will state and not debate in any such way, one way or the other, because I think that's irrefutable. Now, Nebraska, Penn State, those are really the 2 that I think are on the cusp, based on my definition that I just gave. Now, if you want to just go, basically what you're saying, if you are of the changing, that blue bloods change, first of all, you're not understanding of the term. But if you want to go that direction, I would suggest you use the term elite. That's what I talk about, elite. If we were sitting here 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, Clemson's elite. And in a sense, they still are, because I'm not going to knock them off based on 3 years. But they are a current elite program. LSU is right there. No, they're really not, Dave. They're not. They're nowhere close to those other schools. Okay, let's take our call from Defiant. What's going on?
Mark, how are you?
I'm good.
That's good. That's good. Before I talk about the Notre Dame realignment thing, I want to bring up Georgia. I know, again, they're kind of elite right now. Would you consider them a blue blood?
No, they're
Or
not a
are
blue
you just
blood.
looking at
No, they
recently
will
how
never
they've
be
been
a
doing?
blue blood.
So they'll be elite as like Clemson right
Yes, elite. I don't care about blue bloods. It's not a thing for me, but I acknowledge what it is. And Georgia was not a blue blood at the at the forming of college football. Let's call it that. The formation of college football into the modern age. And I'm not speaking, hopefully, to a bunch of Gen Zers that think the modern age was like 1995. No, I'm talking about like the 20s, the 30s, the beginning of the AP poll, the beginning of bowl games, all of that.
The 1936 kind of onward then.
36? Yeah.
AP poll, yeah. So AP poll is 36.
Yeah, that was the AP. And I believe the UPI was about 12 to 14 years behind it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't really consider Georgia a blue blood. Kind of like they recently got good. They recently won national championships. Before that was 1980 was the last national championship, or 82, one of those years.
80. Yep.
Or Herschel Walker or something like.
So
Yeah,
why
I
is
consider them
Miami not a blue blood?
why is what?
Miami.
Oh well, my dad would say yes because he's Miami homer through and through. Recently they haven't been good since. Wow, recently, like they made national championship in what 02
So if
in
this
Ohio
was 20
State.
years ago, you'd be saying Miami's a blue blood?
I would not be saying Miami's a blue blood, no, because they recently been going in the 80s. Before that, Miami was just
No, I'm
another small
saying if
school.
this was 20 years ago.
I would not be considered Miami a blue blood at all.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Defiant, are you listening to yourself? You're considering Georgia a blue blood right now.
No. I was
Oh,
asking you if you would consider Georgia a blue blood. I don't consider
I
Georgia a
thought you
blue
were
blood.
saying you did.
No,
Okay, I'm
I did
sorry.
not. No, I said I do not because of recently how good they've been recently.
Okay.
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm going to say Georgia. I was agreeing with you on that point because I know some people recently been saying, well, Georgia's a blue blood. No. Before that, again, 1980, whatever not the last championship before recently, they haven't been really that good. They've been dominating, yeah, through and through. But, like, again, it's been years before that championship happened. I know Clemson, 40 years before that. So,
So
yeah, no,
what
I
would
don't.
it take for somebody to become a blue blood?
And in modern times, like right now,
Yeah, based on your definition.
well, my definition is you have to be dominant for a period of time. You have to be dominant. I know, again, some schools go through down years and everything. And yeah, again, Clemson, again, they were dominant. I'm just using them as an example. I'm not calling them blue, but I'm using them as an example. They were
So
dominant for a couple of years.
was
But Trevor
Clemson a
Lawrence.
blue blood a couple years ago?
No, I'm using them as an example of my definition.
Oh, well, they were dominant for a decade.
Yeah, so again, they were dominant for a period of time. And yes, they're on a down year now, but they're still kind of good. That's really one of my definitions. I don't really believe in blue bloods.
Okay.
Again, I'm again, you're dominant, you're not. It's just the way the sport is. Through and through. Again, okay, I'm not into all that blue blood stuff. I'm not really, a knowledgeable person when it comes to like, okay, yeah, this team was dominant for this period of time and all that stuff. But I just want to ask you about Georgia. If Georgia was, elite or what were they considered?
All right, Defiant. What are you really here for?
Notre Dame, my friend, Notre Dame, and talking about this crazy move to the Big Ten. I would say this. I don't believe Notre Dame will go to the Big Ten just because of the independence and the rules and some stuff that they have for them in place. Again, Notre Dame are trying to join the Big Ten for what, a whole century now. They tried to join in the 1930s, and they said no. They tried to join in the 90s. Talks went through and everything like that. So I don't believe Notre Dame will ever join the Big Ten, really, unless something catastrophic happened to the ACC. again, I know they were one of the teams that wanted the expansion to happen in ACC, which I was really surprised about. They got Cal, Stanford, and SMU to join the conference. But I don't think really, unless something catastrophic happened, that Notre Dame had to join a conference football, that they will never join a conference.
I think are on the same wavelength. I don't believe that Notre Dame has been more adamant in recent years and months in their statements about not joining a conference. But will money continue to put pressure on them? Or if the SEC and the Big Ten continue to make strides toward dominating the sport, and what I mean by that is having ownership of the sport, that they could force Notre Dame to join a conference.
Oh yeah, I think you have to at least force them to join a conference. You can't just ask them, "Hey, would you like to join a conference?" They're going to say no because they love their independence. Again, they're one of the only independent that has an opportunity at the playoff right now, as it is. UMass has to join a conference. UConn's probably going to join a conference. Notre Dame is the only team right now that has a chance at the 12-team playoff as an independent.
Yeah. And if we played football for the next 20 years and UMass and UConn continue to be independents, nobody would care. Like, it doesn't matter. So really, they're the only independent.
Mm-hmm. And again, Notre Dame has the built-in fan base with all, the majority Catholics and everything. Kind of like how BYU has the LDS fan base. But until then, Notre Dame is still going to be independent no matter what happens. There are other sports might leave the ACC, the non-football sports, but until something catastrophic happens to the ACC, or ACC is gone, then potentially, again, if the Big Ten and SEC come together and try to force Notre Dame to join one of their conferences, I think that's the breaking point right there. I think that's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Very cool. Any other thoughts on this front, Defiant?
Well, I did see some people on the internet being stupid and saying Texas A&M was going to join the Big Ten at one point. I don't know
I've seen that one recently.
Yeah, I think that's stupid. Because why is Texas A&M want to join the Big Ten? They're in the Power too. And yes, I know they didn't like the Texas join, but Texas doesn't have the Longhorn network anymore, and they're going to be in the same conference, which is going to be stable for a period of time. It's going to expand potentially.
Yeah, I can't see Texas A&M separating itself from all of those rivals and schools that connect with them that make total sense, and their fan base and people in Texas really respecting that and wanting to go to Wisconsin to play football games.
Oh, I definitely agree. And I think that's the same way with Florida State, and Miami. They have no conference rivals in the Big Ten. At least the SEC, Florida State has, Florida, Miami has Florida. The Big Ten, they don't have rivals or any schools really close to them that they can build a rivalry with.
Well, I still think that that's more likely to happen, though. And I think it makes more sense. First of all, from an academic standpoint, Miami's just become an AAU school, and Florida State's in the finals to become an AAU school. And I think I have suggested for years that the Big Ten go after Miami and Florida State because of recruiting footprint. I think that would be an exceptional move from purely a football standpoint. And those are two good schools from a academic standpoint. And they're really not, especially Miami's not, they're not an SEC school from the standpoint of regionality and being in a city. So I get your point from a geographic standpoint. They don't belong in the Big Ten, but that, of course, has been blown asunder. Rutgers doesn't even belong in the Big Ten.
Oh no,
I go back to the heart of the Big Ten.
Yes, Mark, as again, Indiana fan and everything like that, I'm fine with these teams joining, but you gotta, again, I see why they brought in UCLA and USC. They're getting the LA market. Oregon, Washington, they're getting, the Portland and Seattle market. I know those two markets ain't big, the bigger markets in the country. But yeah, no, it's just crazy how these conference realignments. I think Notre Dame is going to join before really anything else happens at this point. I think Notre Dame is going to be the reason why Miami or Florida State leaves the ACC. I think, again, that has to happen first, I think, before Miami and Florida State look at the ACC. Be like, well, Notre Dame left, they're a non-football member, but they're still a pretty respected member in the ACC.
I am the most fascinated by the second tier of schools in the ACC myself, because I think that they really hold the ACC together, or they will choose to flee and go to the Big 12, and the ACC will be virtually done. So I'm talking about Virginia Tech, Louisville, NC State, certainly those three, maybe a Pitt, possibly. That I think that their situation is the most fascinating, even though people aren't focusing on them because they're not major football brands and they don't shake up the landscape too much. But they could form an alliance to keep the ACC together, and they're in the most not vulnerable. The most vulnerable is obviously the Wake Forest and the Syracuses of the world, Boston College, but they're in the trickiest position of trying to survey the field and understand their place and their value, to think, okay, do we put our resources into holding the ACC together, or are we going to be able to leave the ACC and find a better place?
No, I definitely agree with that. I think Wake Forest and Boston College would be kind of those teams that kind of try to keep the ACC together, because
Oh,
they'll be screwed.
yeah,
They'll be screwed no matter what if the ACC is
absolutely, they
afloat.
will.
So I really think those three will try to keep the ACC afloat, at least expand westward, get like maybe a San Diego State or something. Because, Cal, Stanford, they have a Big Ten invitation on the way potentially in the future, because, they were in talks before and the money just wasn't right to get to 20 teams at that point.
I was on the warpath to get UCF into the ACC a few years ago, and that would have been a move that UCF would have jumped at when they were still a G5. But I thought, man, this is an enormous school. They're right next to Disney. Orlando is exploding. This whole region in Central Florida is exploding. Again, a huge alumni base. It's a school that's proven that they can play big time football to a certain extent, and that the ACC should have plucked them up, but they didn't. And now they're in the Big 12.
Oh, yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think USF, once they build that new on-campus stadium, I think they would be a target, because you get in the Tampa market. I know USF hasn't been good in football recently, but you get an on-campus stadium, the fan support for that program is going to jump. Playing an NFL stadium is hard for them anyways. So I think once USF builds a new on-campus stadium, you can just get the Tampa market and keep a team in Florida. If Florida State or Miami leaves, or you're both of them leave, just keep a footprint in Florida with USF.
Yeah, and then the Big 12, they could possibly have a nice South Florida feel with UCF, South Florida, and maybe Miami.
Yeah, and that totally screws the ACC, because who's the ACC going to expand to in Florida? FAU, FIU.
No, if I'm in the ACC, I would be looking at Memphis, Tulane.
San Diego State, kind of, for that westward expansion a little bit.
Yeah, I guess if you're going to get crazy and just make it some national conference. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Cal, Stanford on the island. The closest team is SMU in Texas.
No, it's a great point. And then you go get Washington State and Oregon State. I'd be offering them. I posted a video this week that said if I was the ACC, I would go get, let's say the ACC sitting at 17. If they lose down to, let's see, what was my formula? I think I had them losing 7 schools, so they get down to 10. I brought them back to 16. I guess it was Tulane and Memphis, and it was, maybe I just had them down to 12, and then I grabbed Washington State and Oregon State.
Yeah, no, I've seen articles online about Washington State and Oregon State to the ACC if the ACC implodes or they lose members and all that stuff.
And then to find you could play in pods of 4. If you had 16 teams in the ACC and you had 4 on the West Coast, they would be a pod by themselves. and it would much lessen the travel to a certain extent, because you're automatically playing 3 division games, and then you just have to travel half of 5, so 2 or 3 times to the East Coast. So that would leave that travel.
And definitely in other sports too. Texas, SMU, I know they were talking about them being the middle ground for some of the non-revenue sports, and even like baseball and all that stuff. So yeah, I definitely think like Texas could kind of be the middle ground for some of these teams. They can just play, their conference games against, again, out west, Oregon State, Washington could play Cal and Stanford, then travel to SMU because that's their closest opponent and everything. Yeah, I think pilots will make sense in that type of case, and like unlike the other conferences and everything, trying to go to the pilot system.
Okay, Defiant, anything else, man?
Nope, that's all, Mark. That's all I want to talk about.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mark.
Have a good night.
You too.
So I think Defiant was generally on pace with us on the blue blood definition. But we got our new X/Twitter official account at the Voice of College Football. So please join us there, become a follower. We have all sorts of good stuff going on there. So look, you got my preseason top 25. That actually makes sense that I was reluctantly delivering there because of that being based on results, and we've got no results. Wanted to remind a lot of people that considering the rumors that are out there, considering Notre Dame in particular, but also Stanford, that we posted a video 2 years ago with Notre Dame and Stanford coming to the Big Ten along with Oregon and Washington. And that happened, at least half of it so far. Oh, the top 10 helmets in college football. Let's see here. The top 10 helmets in college football. See how many Big Ten helmets we've got in the top 10. This is courtesy our guy TJ on the Michigan channel. Oh, okay. Michigan's number 1. If you can't read that, I should put it on the screen. Notre Dame's 2, Texas is 3, Florida State is 4. Why don't we do this? Yeah. Look at all those comments that came in about Blue Bloods. Oh, the fight songs. I can't say that I'm really prepared to argue fight songs. I'd have to be reminded which is which. I must admit that. I think I missed a post here. I thought we had one on the helmets. Yeah. That's more recent. There we go. The top 10 helmets in college football. Now, you talk about a subjective list. How can you really argue anything? But it's just fun. It's fun to do. My top 10 helmets, see, Michigan, gone. That's an ugly freaking helmet. Horrible. Hate the Michigan helmet. Get rid of it. That's ugly. Gone. Okay. Notre Dame, fine. Texas, I'm not understanding the Texas, helmet inclusion there. I see nothing interesting about Texas's helmet. Nothing. Gone. Florida State, fine. I don't know if they would be in my top 10, but they've got a nice helmet. Ole Miss, Alabama. Might as well put Penn State in there if you're going to put Alabama. I'm okay. Oregon. So Oregon, I really don't know how to rate Oregon's helmet because they got like 80 of them. So I'm going to go with, is this considered the standard Oregon helmet right here? And then Keith, we're going to get to you in just a second. If that is the standard Oregon helmet that we're judging here, forget it. They're not in the top 50. That's an ugly, ugly helmet. Don't like it. Ugly. I've got a penchant against green for one thing. I hate green. Well, I shouldn't say I hate green. It's a nice color for certain things. I don't own any green clothing, for example. Yes, Keith, we're getting to you in just a second. Hang in there, because I'm going to go through this list. Then we also have, so Michigan would be off my list. Texas, for sure, off the list. Oregon, off the list. Tennessee, I don't get Tennessee either. Tennessee looks similar to Texas's helmet. It's a white helmet. It's a plain white helmet with a T on it. No, gone. Clemson, they would not be in my top 10, but that's fine. North Carolina might be, because I think the powder blue is beautiful. I would have UCLA would be in my top 10. Helmets are difficult because there are so many variations of these helmets now that if we're thinking traditional helmets, what has happened in college football is with the introduction of these chrome helmets, that has improved everybody's helmet. Like Wake Forest, ugly uniforms, ugly helmet, but you put the chrome on, the whole deal, and the flashy, the shine on the uniforms and the chrome helmets, or you go the matted look, suddenly it looks great. Purdue, the same thing. Ugly uniforms, but boom, go with the chrome helmet and all that, suddenly they look good. Northwestern, they always had ugly uniforms, but boom, now they've spiced it up with the black, the chrome. So whoever came up with that was a smart person from a fashion standpoint. And before we get to Keith, we got Rees. Thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. We will get you the Discord link. Keith, what's going on tonight?
Hey, you're a little bit on the rampage on Michigan tonight, Mark.
Rampage? What rampage am I on?
Yeah.
I just listed them when I went down Blue Bloods. I think I named them first.
That you did, but you're discounting some of our championships because the forward pass was not legal.
Okay.
In rugby, laterals and rearward are lateral, so I imagine they were playing with that in the day. It just the forward was not legal, but it was not illegal at the same time. The passing came around where I think it was around 1910. Somebody just threw it forward.
1913.
13. There you go. And then a year or two after that, they made it a rule that you could only pass forward from behind the line of scrimmage. Correct?
So I am not an expert on this. I have read the various depictions and do that every so often. So maybe every 5 years I revisit it. And I did hear recently, so I don't want to mess up the date. So I think your 1910 reference is correct about complete illegal forward pass, that there are no forward passes in college football as of 1910. And then when they were legalized, everyone was hesitant to throw and discouraged from throwing because, number one, you lost the ball. If there was an incomplete pass, you lost possession of the football. So that's kind of a deterrent to throwing the ball. If you lose, even if it's first down, you throw a pass, it's incomplete, you give up the downs, you give up the ball. Number two, you couldn't throw the ball more than 40 yards. You couldn't. You also could not throw the ball into the end zone. There were a number of things. You had to be at least 5 yards for a time, at least 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage to throw the ball. A lot of odd rules that were deterrents to throwing the football.
Yeah, and you have much more encyclopedic knowledge of that stuff than I do, so I'll give you the credit on that. But my point is that anybody probably before that point could have thrown the ball forward. It's just I don't think anybody thought of it till 1913.
I cannot answer that. And maybe it was good reason that they didn't think of it, because it was the risk reward was not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to do some research on that. That'd be interesting, but that's like saying that. And also, when you talk, the next point is when you talk about the club football, and intramural football that they have the things. Club is a much higher level than intramural is, but over in the East Coast in the Harvard and Yales, they still have club football there. I remember seeing a video of a retired colonel or something that was playing for Yale or something like that. So yeah, back in the day, there might have been some club and intramural teams mixing the schedule, but when did Ohio State start playing football?
They joined the Big Ten in 1912. Their first year of football, I don't remember. Was it 1896?
Yeah.
I'll look that up right now. But I know their first year in the Big Ten was 1912.
Yeah, but before that, I would not be man enough to go into the locker room or whatever they had there. Maybe they just gathered in the sidelines. They didn't even have locker rooms back then, but I wouldn't want to go into the crowd of players and tell them they weren't football players.
Okay. Well, at the time, I wouldn't have not called them football players, because that's all we would have known at the time.
Yeah, that's my point. Is so all those should count as footballs. And another one you wouldn't, I wouldn't, I hate to tell, is Jim Thorpe. You brought up the question of a couple months ago when we were on that subject, but I can make the point that in that 1901 championship where Michigan beat Illinois, my understanding is that Jim Thorpe was actually in that game, but he was either 40 or 50 years old. He was like twice the average of everybody else, but he was still a decent player. Wasn't dominant, but a
When
contributor.
was this?
In 1901.
Really?
Yep. That's what I seem to remember reading about that 1901 championship. That
I didn't think Jim Thorpe was that old. I'm looking him up right now.
Yeah.
Okay, Jim Thorpe was born. Okay, this was my recollection of Jim Thorpe. Jim Thorpe played for the Canton Bulldogs and played in the beginning of the NFL and pre-NFL during like the 19 teens. That's what I was going to come back with you on that. And I know that he wasn't 40 or 50 years old. Jim Thorpe was born in 1887.
87. Okay, so then it wasn't the 01 championship. It was one of Michigan's championships. Jim Thorpe played in a very old age, I guess. If you look at all the in Michigan versus Illinois, I think there was one that he played in when he was like in his 40s or 50s.
Okay, well, Illinois could use him right now.
Yeah, Illinois has been down a little bit. Yeah, they probably use somebody like Jim Thorpe at it. Yeah. Yep. And my last point I want to bring up with you is Michigan helmet. I think you're being unfair to New Hampshire.
And Delaware.
Delaware. I'm sorry, Delaware. I got the states mixed up. Yeah. Yeah, you're being unfair to Delaware because you're letting Delaware keep their helmets, but not Michigan.
So if I grew up a Kansas State fan, who knows how I would feel or how I would look at the Michigan helmet? I have no idea. I have no idea if I just believe that and see that as ugly regardless, or if it's because of my upbringing. I don't know. I can't answer that.
Yeah,
but
does Kansas State have a winged helmet too?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Did you say Kansas State has a winged helmet?
No. I was just making a comment that if I was a fan of some random team that had no
Oh, okay.
connection to Michigan, I don't know how I would feel about Michigan's helmet now,
Yeah.
but I can only respond based on it's just like music. If you grew up in a different household in a different part of the country and your parents were different and all that other stuff, you may like different music than you do now. You don't know.
Yep.
So I think Michigan's helmets are ugly. That's all I'm saying. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't be in TJ's number one position, because that is the most subjective list that we're going to go through, is rating helmets and jerseys.
Yeah. And I can remember a bunch of other people saying that they hated the Michigan helmets too, but I think they were from the Michigan State community.
Well, see, there you go. So I am in no way trying to push the thought that objectively that they're just ugly. No, that everyone has their own style and taste.
Yeah. And when you got to the colors of the uniforms, I agree with you. I don't think green is a color for football. I've never liked the Oregon uniforms that much. Another thing I don't like is the blue field that used to be at Boise State. I don't know if it's still there or not, but
It is.
I haven't. It is? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. It just doesn't seem right to have a blue football field to me.
Well, if you're going to have an artificial field, then what does it matter what color it is?
Yeah. The artificial fields are artificial grass, though, right? They're not artificial carpets.
Well, they were at one point. All those teams in the Big Ten except Purdue played on AstroTurf.
Yep.
Ohio State, Michigan State, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota.
Yeah, and they used to go back and forth every 5 years or so, remember?
What do you mean they used to go back and forth?
Back in the 70s and 80s, they used to say, we want to go back to natural grass for a while, and they go to natural grass, and they used to switch back and forth. Different schools would.
I know that when did Michigan go to? I'm trying to think. They went maybe like in 1990, 91. Because I can envision, okay, I've got it. I can envision the 89 Ohio State Michigan game. That was played on AstroTurf at Michigan Stadium. And the 91 game, the Desmond Howard game, was played on grass.
Was that at Ohio Stadium or Michigan?
No, at Michigan in 91
was on grass. It was on grass. 91 was in grass, and 90 was on artificial turf in Ohio?
No, they had just switched. So Ohio State 88 was on artificial turf. 89 they went to grass.
They went back to grass. Okay, yes. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's what I remember. And that was happening in the pros in baseball and football too. The different teams would switch back and forth from grass. For about 2 decades, they kept switching back and forth. A few of them every year.
Keith, I don't recall anybody switching back and forth. They switched.
Well, yeah, it's mostly just to switch back to grass temporarily and then go back to artificial turf. It was okay. This.
I got you. Field turf, yes. All of that.
Oh yeah, yep. That's the name of it.
I got you.
When they got the field turf, that kind of settled the debate, and everybody went to field turf after that came up. Yeah. Yeah. So that's good. And last point I want to bring up is that if we value the forward pass that much, I believe somebody said that J.J. McCarthy only had 1 touchdown pass in the month of December. Is that accurate?
December?
Yeah.
He only played 1 game. or maybe technically 2, I guess. Did they play on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, the Alabama game?
Uh,
That was on New
no,
Year's Day.
that was New Year's Day. That was January. Oh, we only had one game in December. That's why they said that. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, they
All
played
right.
Iowa.
Yeah. I was, for some reason, I was thinking they're playing like 4 games like the NFL does. Yeah.
No.
So maybe that's why they only played one game. They only had one touchdown. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's nothing damning then. I thought it was a whole month that he didn't only got one touchdown in 4 weeks. But yeah, because against Penn State he didn't have a passing touchdown, right?
Yeah, he only threw 8 passes.
Yeah, he only threw 8 passes the whole game. Yeah, no touchdown. Yeah. So yeah, if we're gonna disqualify champs like that in games like that in the past, does that mean if JJ doesn't throw a touchdown pass in the game, then we disqualify that win as well?
Should I let you off the hook, Keith, and alert you to how ridiculous of a statement that is, or should I just like start ranting and raving and reaming you for the next 10 minutes? Which should I do?
No, it's all in fun. It's
Okay.
all in,
Okay.
it's
All right.
it's all in fun. Yeah. But yeah, it's just I take football for what it is for that day. I take a team that is so heavily focused on the run, like Michigan's been for the last 3 years. I call that good football. You know, I don't need the flash of the Ohio States and the who are the other great spread offenses, the USC's. I don't need the flash of the spread offense to make it a good football game.
Okay. Do you understand that CJ Stroud's last year at Ohio State, how many times do you think Ohio State threw the ball in comparison to the rest of college football?
I saw an interesting stat on that they actually ran. Oh no, was it Bama? They ran 1% more than we did last year, and I believe that some of those Ohio State teams actually outrushed us too. That when you guys get a good backfield, you lean on the runners just like we do.
Yeah, so CJ Stroud, he was arguably the best quarterback in the country. Ohio State only threw the ball the 60th most times his senior season or his last season.
Okay. Yeah, that's a little bit surprising to me. I thought what Ohio State was a little more pass heavy because of all the attention that the wide receivers always get. So it's probably a common misconception among casual fans.
All right, Keith, anything else?
No, I really
Anything
enjoyed
else
that.
I got wrong?
Not wrong. It's a difference of opinion.
Well, I appreciate you being here. I always appreciate your calls.
Yeah, I appreciate being here. Thanks for having me. Go Blue.
All right, good to hear from Keith. So yes, far be it from me to argue that the forward pass is a fairly integral part of the sport of football. It's kind of like tackling. Maybe we should play touch football and then equate that to championships that were won while players actually tackled. We could do that. Nick, what's going on tonight? Hello, Nick. Are you there? I think you're on mute if you can hear me.
A sec.
There you are.
Can you hear me now?
We got you.
There we go.
How you doing?
Okay, I'm doing good. But this narrative you're trying to peddle now about you hate Michigan's, give me a break, man. Are you serious? You don't think they have an iconic helmet?
I didn't say it wasn't iconic.
Or what? You said it was
I
ugly?
did.
What did you
Those
say?
are two different things. I could recite all sorts of things throughout history that are iconic. One comes to mind that's pure evil, but I'm not going to cite it. That's iconic, but it's awful. We would all agree, I hope.
So you must hate. You must hate. Is it Princeton's football helmets too?
Who?
Princeton. Don't they have the same?
I don't know.
They have the. They have
It's been
the
a while
same.
since I've caught a Princeton football game.
Well, they have the same design. I'm pretty sure Michigan got their helmet. I think it's orange and black though, instead of. Well, why don't you like their helmet? Why are you being a Buckeye homer?
Okay, here's the deal, Nick. Let me explain something to you. It's called human emotion. Like, I didn't sit down and think about it and think, should I like their helmet or should I not like their helmet? Let me make the pros and cons list here. No, I wasn't filling out a ledger for a bank account or something, or trying to determine, mathematics. Like, if you listen to a song for the first time and you're like, you don't sit there and think about, should I like this song or shouldn't I like this song? No, it's an emotional response. Correct? Like,
sometimes.
Do you what kind of ice cream do you like?
I don't really like ice cream.
Okay,
I would say
what's a type of food that you enjoy?
pizza.
Okay, what food don't you enjoy?
It's a good question. Liver, maybe?
Liver. Why? Why not? Why don't you like it?
Because that's not an organ that any human should be ingesting. And that's a fact.
And you came to that deduction the very first time you had liver, or did you just have an emotional response that you didn't like it on your taste buds and you just rejected it?
I didn't even taste it. I just had to look. I just had to look at it. People have been trying to get me to eat that garbage for years.
Did you hear my explanation to Keith on not liking the Michigan helmet, and that could be impacted by my background, my experience, my upbringing, all those things?
Because you're a Buckeye fan. That's what you're saying. You hate Michigan's helmet.
Yes.
Because you're a Buckeye fan.
Maybe. I don't know. There are other uniforms in college football that I hate as well. That doesn't mean that they're objectively horrible uniforms. That just means that I hate them. I've been trading musical selections, songs with a friend of mine, and they don't ask me why I hate that song, or, they're songs that they love. They send me and I'm like, that's a piece of crap. I will never listen to that song the rest of my life. It's an emotional response. It's visceral.
I just think you're way off on that, even subjectively.
No, I'm not way off on it. Okay, let's take something iconic. If we asked everyone in the chat, do you like the Beatles? There would be people, because I see it all over online. No, I hate the Beatles. They suck. But they cannot be argued they're iconic. That doesn't mean that personal preferences can't be that I don't like them.
Okay.
Correct?
Fine.
Right?
Sure.
I didn't say that they weren't iconic helmets. Of course they are.
That's just so disrespectful.
No, it's not disrespectful. I hate their helmets. I don't like them.
Well, I hate Ohio.
Okay, fine. Exactly. You hate Ohio State's helmets. They're iconic. You have to like them. Well, that's stupid.
No, I'm just messing with you.
We have rid the world, Nick, is at least our little corner of the college football universe of just insanity. We are doing our best.
Well, we're fanatics. So, I did want to ask you. There was an interesting conversation. Or first, let me ask you this: what? I may have asked you this a while ago, but so you're how confident that the Big Ten is going to continue to expand?
How confident?
Like percentage wise?
I'm going to say, give me a year. Are we talking the next 5 years?
Oh, yeah, I'd say so. Probably next 3 to 5.
I am 30% confident.
Oh wow, okay. I thought it'd be the opposite. I thought you'd be pretty confident. Why is that?
I believe that they want Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is going to do everything they possibly can to hang on to their independence. And nobody is, unless the structure of the authority of college football changes drastically, nobody is forcing Notre Dame to do anything.
Okay.
I would have been a little bit more confident here in the last few months with Florida State, but the rhetoric out there seems to be that the Big Ten isn't necessarily just going to pursue Florida State.
Yeah, isn't that very recent?
Yes.
So I don't know a whole lot. I've heard bits and pieces here. It seems like just kind of, I guess I don't know all the details, but this whole Florida State to the Big 12 thing, what is that? To me, that doesn't make any sense. I heard something about like they're just going to, if they would get paid like a ridiculous amount of money to go to that conference, which it's like, well, where are they going to get that kind of money? Like,
So Nick, you're a smart guy. Back up on your previous statement. It doesn't make sense. What doesn't make sense about it? You just don't like it? It doesn't feel right?
it seems like Florida, I mean, to me, just based on the little that I know about that whole situation, they, the Big 12 isn't as a conference going to generate as much money as the Big Two conferences, the Big Ten, the SEC. And if Florida State is so gung-ho on leaving the ACC, why would it be for the Big 12?
Well, here would be my thought that when they made that determination, they overvalued themselves. And
Okay.
now they need to make different considerations.
Now, I did hear something, and again, I don't know if this is true. I thought I heard this from someone on the Cover 3 podcast. It was like, I don't know, like, what do they call it? Private, I'm blanking on words now. Private, I don't know, private money involved or something like that.
Yeah, private equity donors.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that had something to do with it, with them going to the Big 12. But I don't know. The whole thing I think it just kind of surprised me more than anything else. But I didn't really look into it too much because it kind of seems like Florida State's been throwing a tantrum, for lack of a better word, for a couple months. So, and it kind of seems like they're stuck in the ACC. But
you wouldn't feel the same way about Michigan if they were in a conference where they were earning half the amount of money that other major brands across the country were?
No, I'd feel the same. That's fine. Yeah, you could expect Michigan to get ticked off. So I just didn't know like the monetary, like what I guess I didn't know if you had any more like specific details on that whole thing. So that was just kind of interesting. I was just surprised. And there was another team too. Was it Clemson that was included with them?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's an interesting situation. Yeah, they may have overvalued themselves, but I don't know. Just that doesn't seem like a fit at all to me. Like what other, I guess maybe there are other teams, but what other teams would you consider as valuable who are in the Big 12 now?
Well, I agree with you. And we're going to class up our set here and put the mighty winged helmet on the background here. So in honor of you, Nick, there it is.
Oh, thank you, Mark. I appreciate it, even though I know you hate it.
So where were we? Clemson. Clemson going to
Clemson,
the Big
Florida
12.
State. Yep.
Yeah, because you and I have a reasonable reaction to this. We believe that conferences and alignments should make sense in terms of Clemson. You know, the Big 12, and I'm a little older than you, the Big 12 reeks of the Plains and the Dust Bowl and Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, those states, not Clemson, South Carolina, and Florida State. And so it just doesn't feel right, doesn't look right. It seems completely out of place. That's where I think your reaction's coming from. And that's my reaction as well. And then you made total sense with the thought that, well, Clemson is creating this whole level of uncertainty with the ACC, and they started it, meaning Florida State. So if they would just stay in the ACC, they'd have a similar situation as they would in the Big 12. So they're spending all this money and going to court and kicking and screaming to get out of the ACC to go to the Big 12, not the Big 10 or the SEC. I get your point.
Yeah, and maybe they did overvalue themselves initially, but I mean, they're still good programs. And even if you're the Big 10 or the SEC, if you think they're going to help make your conference more valuable, you should do it.
And the Big 12 right now is being led by somebody who, despite a few videos that I posted where I've kind of laid away some of his comments, he's a much, much more innovative and forward-thinking visionary commissioner than Jim Phillips with the ACC.
Well, yeah, that may be the case, but I guess I don't know the specific numbers, but I don't know how I would think what the other Big 12 schools are making. Florida State and Clemson would be considered more valuable than those other colleges. So I just don't know how that's feasible unless they're talking about private equity coming in and throwing a bunch of additional money. But then that just gets oddly complicated and could really mess things up for them. I don't see a Florida State wanting to do that. So I don't know. So are you pretty sold on the Big 12, the Big 10? You think, is it reasonable to say that the Big 10 is just not going to really hardcore pursue any more expansion unless it involves Notre Dame?
Well, the Big 10 doesn't seem to be making any kind of moves that I would have made over the last 10 or 15 years. I certainly would not have plucked up Rutgers and Maryland. I don't see what that did. So that wasn't, it didn't hurt the league. The league's still in a great place, but it certainly didn't help the league. USC and UCLA are far, far away, but there are certain ties and attachments to the West Coast and the Pac-12 and those rivalries throughout history. So that makes sense to me. So I'm just going in a roundabout way of stating that I would have made different moves over the last 10 or 15 years than the Big 10. So the moves that I would make in the future may be different than the Big 10, but I would take Notre Dame. Shoot, what's the Big 10 at? The Big 10's at 18.
Yep.
I have always said I would go to Florida and get Miami and Florida State. I've been saying that for 5 years if I was the Big 10. But if Notre Dame says yes, you got Notre Dame, and then you got to pair somebody with Notre Dame, and then you're sitting at 22, and all sorts of people would be at an outrage because they don't think you can run a league with 22 teams. Well, if you're going to run it with 24, I don't know why we have to be at these magical numbers. So I'd get Notre Dame and Stanford and Florida State and Miami.
Oh my gosh. I don't know why. Something about when you start talking about a conference having 20-something teams.
Oh, I don't like it.
Jeez.
But I'm talking about competing against the SEC and everybody else. But no, I don't like it.
I can't even wrap, even though we're close to it now with 18, I still can't even wrap my mind around it. I still believe, I don't know if it's because the college football game is coming out or what, but I still don't think that it's really sunk in how wild this next year of college football's going to be. I think, and one thing you can bank on is that people are not going to be happy with who makes the playoffs, even though they were pounding the desk for years now. We have to expand. We have to expand, and it's just going to be the same argument again, just 12 versus 13 or 14. So,
yeah, I agree with you. You are right. There will be teams that are left out, and they will have a justifiable reason to argue being in. So let me put it this way. They will not have an excuse for being left out, meaning a 9-3 team in the SEC cannot be complaining that they didn't make the playoffs because they had every opportunity to win another game or two or three and make the playoffs. So it's not like the era of the 14 playoff where we could be counting for the next 10 minutes the number of teams that had a resume that was on par with the 4 that were selected, especially conference champions that were left out. Obviously, that's been taken care of. The point I'm making is that there will be teams that are left out that will have a legitimate gripe, meaning that their resume is similar to the teams that were the final selections. But their complaints, at least for me, are going to fall on deaf ears because they're going to have far more opportunities, of course, to make the field. And the buffer, the allowance is so greater of errors that you can make throughout the season. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I do think, unfortunately, I think we're going to see a ton of blowouts.
Yeah.
Because I still just think there's only a couple teams. I know the last couple of years have been a little different. There's maybe been like 6-7 teams that were considered legitimate national title contenders. But in the past, there's been a lot of years where it's really only like 2, maybe 3.
Yeah.
So it's going to probably in the best case scenario, provide a bigger stage for a smaller school who had a really good season, like smaller school than even like TCU, which TCU is not small, but I think you know what I'm saying. Yeah. But so yeah, it's going to be interesting. I just think like if it's not, and this might sound obvious. It's obviously not the same thing making the 12-team playoff as it was the 4-team playoff. And I think that, I'm sure there's fans out there that are going to think this, but like if you were a team like Penn State or you were a team who made the college football playoff, the 4-team college football playoff, that's still going to be your standard. Just making the 12-team playoff is not like going to really mean much.
Nope.
So, that's why like I know people kind of say in jest like this 12-team playoff was made for Penn State. But like if Penn State was failing before because they weren't making the 4-team, it's not like they're going to be, at least I won't consider them having any more of a successful season. If they make the 12-team playoff and get smoked, or whether that's Michigan or, how you wouldn't be what Ohio State fan would you know that would be, if you make the 12-team playoff and you get smoked in the first round, that's a failure.
Absolutely.
And you guys aren't going to tout, oh, we made the playoffs. We made it. No, that's ridiculous.
Well, we're looking at a situation where, aside from 2011, if we're just looking at Jim Tressel, Urban Meyer, Ryan Day teams, the last time Ohio State would have missed a 12-team playoff was 2004. So, especially considering the hype surrounding this particular team, but in any year, Ohio State fans are just expecting to go to the playoffs. They're not even considering that they could miss the playoffs. So that's a complete, yes, Ryan Day, if he goes to the playoffs this year and loses immediately, he could get fired.
See, that's what's interesting to me. I actually believe in most years the 12-team playoff virtually, I guess this goes against a little bit what I was saying before, but don't you almost think in a way the 12-team playoff makes it more difficult for Ohio State to fire Ryan Day if he just stays at this level?
No.
You don't?
I get your point, but not if I'm pulling the trigger, not if I'm his boss.
Okay, so what do well, let me ask you this. Do you think we really live in a world, like, is it really realistic that we live in a world where Ryan Day could get fired mainly because he continues to lose to Michigan? Like, because I just don't think, to me, that seems like more of a specific matchup issue for Ryan Day. Now I'm not saying he hasn't made adjustments. He's made a lot of changes. Good on him for that. But that just kind of seems like its own separate thing. Ohio State's always going to have top tier talent, and they're always going to be competitive, or at least for the most part. It's reasonable to assume that, yeah, they may have lost to Michigan that year, but they very well could turn around and beat Georgia or Alabama. I mean, Ohio State's still going to be as dangerous to win the whole thing. So I don't see a scenario where, unless it's, well, we need to get rid of him because he's losing to Michigan, I just think that's a little different because I think he's going to be competitive against everybody.
Oh, I think it's substantially different, but I still think the Michigan game weighs heavily into the equation. So if Ryan Day loses to Michigan this year, and then Ohio State, similar to 2022, but with a winning result, they go into the playoff and they go to the national championship game, he's not getting fired.
Yeah.
But if they lose to Michigan and lose the first game of the playoffs, and especially if they get embarrassed, then he may get fired. Or if over the next 3 years, his resume is littered with Michigan losses and playoff disappointments and he gets fired, we'll never know which was which, how much of it was Michigan. But I still think that weighs heavily into it. But he can, if his teams are as good as they have been or better, then he can overcome Michigan losses, even though Ohio State fans aren't going to like it, of course, and they shouldn't. You can overcome that now. Like, we could flip the same thing around if we went back 3-4 years and said Jim Harbaugh, except Jim Harbaugh was not, of course, posting records like Ryan Day, but we could say the same thing. It's now a 12-team playoff, and Harbaugh keeps losing to Ohio State. Can he keep losing to Ohio State? Well, yeah, if there's a 12-team playoff and he goes into the playoffs and has deep playoff runs.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't expect Ryan Day to take really much of a significant step back that would, well, like you said, I mean, and I guess, like, if he continues to lose to Michigan, then the pressure is just going to ramp up, because at a certain point it's ridiculous, right? You can't lose to Michigan 12 times in a row. You can't do that.
Yeah.
But
Well,
we all know that, and I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think anybody believes that's going to happen. But, yeah, I don't know. I think the only way, I think people saying if he loses to Michigan this year that he would get fired, I think that's ridiculous. It would be a disappointment. But if everything else goes the way that we kind of expect with this roster, I think there's a really good chance that they're in the national title game. So if he loses to Michigan, I think, well, let me put it this way. The only way that he would get fired after this year, because I know people are saying hot seat. I think people like to jump to that pretty quickly because it's clickbaity and it's fun to say. But in all, realistically, I don't think he's on the hot seat this year unless it's a disaster. Like, and by disaster, I mean you lose to Michigan at home. You go to the Big Ten championship, you lose to Michigan again, like, just hypothetically, like an absolute disaster. You lose back-to-back to Michigan and you miss the playoffs, and yeah, he probably gets canned. But I think the chances of that happening are like less than 1%. So that's why it's really interesting to me. Because I just have no idea, unless it's a disaster scenario, what kind of timeline he's on where Ohio State would say enough if he just can't beat Michigan, but is competitive. Because, Harbaugh would have lost. He lost, 5 in a row, 6 in a row, something like that.
5.
Well, he would have lost 6 in the COVID season. Yeah. I don't know. Do you think Ryan Day could survive 6 straight losses to?
Give me the playoff results of those seasons.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm talking about. That's kind of like the point I was. So yeah, we're on the same page with that one. I would say, yeah, unless it's a disaster, like you could.
If he's losing to Michigan, even if he's winning a playoff game and then losing generally, let's say in that range, he's losing to Michigan, then he loses the first playoff game, or even he wins a playoff game and loses. Let's say that's the trend. I think he still gets fired after a couple more years if they're losing in the second round of the playoffs.
Well, and I think that makes a little bit more sense because it's like at that point you have a large enough sample size where it's like our expectations are to beat Michigan and win a national championship, not even necessarily compete. Every year, Ohio State, unless there's like some big weakness, it's like, hey, we need to win a title. That is a reasonable expectation. So if that doesn't happen long enough, no matter how close he's been, then yeah, you've clearly reached a cap or your ceiling. And that's not the expectation there. He could get away. The crazy thing is like Ryan Day. If Ohio State, even if that happened, like let's say a disaster happens this next year. Let's say Ohio State loses 3 games, somehow misses the playoffs or whatever, and he gets canned. How quickly, set aside the NFL, what other almost every other school would line up to hire him right away.
Yeah, he would get hired quickly.
Which is crazy. Literally almost anybody. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting, however it plays out, it's going to be interesting to look back because times are a little bit different now.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely they are. The tough call for Ohio State administration would be if we're sitting here 5 years from now and Ryan Day has basically split against Michigan. He either went 2-3 or 3-2 against Michigan, and they're getting into the playoffs and not making it as far as they need to. They haven't won a national championship. Let's say they haven't even gone to a national title game. And they lose in the semifinals a lot, and they just keep hitting the same place.
Yeah. Yeah. And in a way, he could become kind of a victim of his own success, being an elite recruiter, being an elite play caller, having elite offenses. If you look back, if something goes wrong and he does get canned, you're going to look back on that missed field goal against Georgia, and especially if you're Ryan Day, just pulling your hair out because I don't care what anyone says. I think our rivalry is great, but I would rather win a national championship. Yeah. I know that Michigan fans could have come back and said, well, we beat you. I don't think that would have been as prevalent or happened as much if Ohio State went on to win that title, because not only would they have beaten Georgia, but they beat the team that we choked to. So even though we beat Ohio State, I don't know. To me, it kind of, if you win a national title, to me, that point's kind of.
Yeah. Well, in addition to my own rooting interest, for my channel, for our channel here, I thought, well, this would be beautiful. debate for the entire season. Michigan beat Ohio State, but Ohio State won the national championship. How beautiful is that? That argument.
Well, oh yeah. But the wild thing to me was, correct, I don't have all the stats and everything, but I watched CJ Stroud. I mean, yeah, I'm pretty biased when it comes to Michigan, but I like to think I was fair. I've been fairly objective about CJ Stroud for his whole career. I've always liked him. And people ripped on him for different things that really weren't his fault. But if Ohio State goes on to win that title that year, the way that I agree with Steve Dace on this, the way that he played against Georgia seemed like he ran a lot more, like used his legs, more through dual threat. He played like, bar none, far and away the number one overall pick. And it's like, man, why didn't he play like that against Michigan? Because I think Ohio State probably would have won. So I don't know. That's kind of a dumb question, because there's a lot of things that play into it and a lot of things we don't know. But yeah, I mean, if Ohio State goes on to win that title, just the way that CJ Stroud played, you could have come back and, you know, even if Michigan fans were to say, well, we beat you, it's not a crazy supporting point for one side or the other, but to me, he played completely different. Or just not completely different, but just clearly raised his level of play.
Yeah.
That was just like a wow. Like, where's this guy been? So, or kind of like, man, he could do that this whole time? Jeez, why wasn't he running? But anyway, and then one last question for you. I've taken up too much time. Who, with this new game coming out, people have been talking a lot about, oh, there's not a player who's 99 overall. And then they've been talking about, well, if there was a player in the past who would be a 99 overall. And I've heard a lot of people say Cam Newton. And you're not really into video games, so you probably don't care about the 99 rating, but set aside the actual rating, like a perfect score, top tier player. More modern day, like post 2000 quarterbacks. I don't know. This is just me. Who would you take, Vince Young or Cam Newton?
Cam Newton. Okay.
Just because he was like a one-man wrecking crew, essentially.
Well, yeah, I'm just talking about real football. As we saw in the NFL, he was a superior passer to Vince Young.
Yeah, I'm talking more like college.
Yeah, well, he was that in college as well. I think the numbers won't necessarily bear it out, but he showed in the NFL that he was a better passer than Vince Young.
Do you think Vince Young is in that, like, if you were to think like tiers?
Oh, yeah.
Of elite quarterbacks? Because I guess I just kind of go back to, and Cam Newton was on a big stage. I give Cam Newton credit because I think one of the best signs of greatness, of how great a player really is, regardless of sport, is if they make their teammates better. It's when a player can do that, it's uncanny and frankly amazing to watch. Because I don't think I don't remember any other players off that team that Cam Newton was on. I don't even know if any of those guys really went on to the NFL, or I'm sure maybe a couple.
Yeah, they had NFL players, but not. Yeah, there were very few notable players off that team. Nick, we better get going here.
Alrighty. Well, thanks for taking my call.
Thanks for calling. All right, let's pick up our last two calls here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate Will being so patient. Will, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. Mark, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. How are you?
Oh my gosh, I'm getting into that college football feeling. I've been watching.
Oh, there you are.
I've been watching so many old games on YouTube. I need the college football to come.
What's the last game you watched?
I was watching the rematch, Florida State, Florida Sugar Bowl rematch, 1994 season.
Oh, the 94 season, not the 96 season.
I'll probably watch the 96 season one too.
The 94 season, was that? I get the games mixed up. They tied that season. And then Florida State won in 94? Yeah.
Yeah. But Mark, who do you think is going to be a surprise team this season? I mean, it could be in the Big Ten if you want to keep it Big Ten focused.
No, we've kind of cut loose and just talked about whatever. Surprise team. So again, you know my favorite stat, plus or minus 3 teams. There were 26 last year, everyone, out of 70 in the Power 5. So shake up your brain about who could elevate or decline. I've been looking at SMU. I've been looking at SMU. They have a pretty strong defense, and I know Group of 5 teams have not transitioned well the first year. Historically, the last 4 in the Big 12 last year, TCU, Utah did not. But, they have Vegas odds that are better than North Carolina and Virginia Tech to win the ACC. If they could get into an ACC championship game,
that would be huge for them.
I don't recall their schedule. So, yeah, we're going pretty dark horse here. But I did a dark horse video. I included them, and I included Iowa State. Let's see if they avoid anyone in the ACC. I'm sure they avoid somebody. The conference is so big now. So 2024 SMU, you've got okay, so they're out of conference, doesn't even matter because they're not yeah. Oh, they do play Florida State and at Louisville. So that's a rough start. That's a challenging start. Those 2 games, one on the road. And then it gets pretty light there. Stanford, Duke, Pitt, BC, Virginia, Cal. That's what I was looking at.
Yeah. I mean, that Duke game's the toughest game probably, right?
So if they could somehow win at Louisville, because I do think I don't know if 6-2 might get you to the ACC championship game. It's possible.
I was thinking Virginia Tech because of the returning production.
Yep. Yeah. Of course,
if they could win, I know one of their first ACC games is at Miami. If they can win at the Hard Rock, they're definitely cooking.
Yeah, Friday night game for them at Hard Rock.
I mean, that seems like the typical game Miami would blow in like the last 15 or so years.
Oh, yeah. So Virginia Tech, can you guys see? Yeah, I got it up there. Okay, forget the out of conference at Miami. And then, yeah, they could go on a run. And they've got Clemson in Blacksburg.
That's a win. I mean, with how Clemson's looked the past few years, that's very winnable. But if Clemson can step it up, especially on their offensive line with Matt Luke, they could be
if they
more
could
formidable.
Split the Miami Clemson games, they'd be 5-1, and then Duke and Virginia.
Yeah, I mean that's very doable, and they should take care of their non-conference too, so they could be a playoff team.
Yeah. What if? Yeah. I was trying to go the Washington State, Oregon State route with their Mountain West schedules, but they are both playing their rival games.
Mark, I love the fact that they had their media day.
Oh yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah.
At the same time, right after the Big 12 one, I believe. Indiana could be an interesting one.
Indiana?
Yeah.
Okay, what are we expecting them to do?
Maybe 3-game improvement, maybe.
Oh, okay. When you said sleeper, I'm looking for
Yeah. Well, yeah.
championships here. Indiana, so they should win these two to open, and UCLA, they could. When you think about, I was talking about this with Steve Dace the other day. When you think
Mhm.
about Kurt Signetti in a coaching matchup against Deshaun Foster,
That sounds good for Kurt Signetti.
yeah, they could be 4-0, and then they've got Maryland at home. It's winnable. At Northwestern, winnable. What's the best we can hope for there? 5-1.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, Jeffrey will be jumping for joy.
Then it gets a little tougher.
Oh, they could beat Nebraska maybe, and maybe win at Michigan State, but they aren't beating Washington or Michigan.
Yeah, 5, 6. Yeah. Can they go 7-5?
Yeah.
Maybe they go 7-5.
What do you think of I enjoyed looking at the list that TJ and then who I talked to last night, and then the Nebraska guy made. Those were fun.
Yeah, the blue blood conversation. Were you around for that?
Unfortunately, I wasn't.
I dove into the blue blood argument.
How do you think Nebraska is teetering at all, or do you think they're safe?
Well, the way I define it, they're either in or they're out. And that's the end of the discussion. It's a lifetime achievement. It's not even an achievement. It's a original achievement that you either keep or you don't keep. So I don't use the term blue blood. Never do I use it. I only bring it up when other people bring it up to me. I'm not a blue blood guy. Are you elite?
Mm-hmm.
So in my definition, Miami was elite 20 years ago. They're not elite now. Clemson's there's a program that's teetering on elite. Are they still elite?
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame is the bluest of the blue bloods and iconic and all that. Are they elite right now? I don't rate them as elite, but they're certainly within striking distance. And it wouldn't take much for them to.
Yeah, like if we have the year that I hope we have, if that is the year I hope they have, like 11.
They go 11-1 and go to the playoff and win a game or two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, then I'm putting them back into an elite category.
Mm-hmm.
I may need to see it one more time.
Okay, Mark.
I may need to see it from Texas again.
If Texas beats Michigan, I'm putting them at elite. Like I'm putting them there for sure.
Now I need to see the season.
Okay,
if Texas goes 9-3 and misses the playoffs,
no.
Yeah, their one playoff run does not give them elite status in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia.
That's it, really.
Yeah.
Oregon's teetering.
Yeah, Oregon's close.
Yeah.
And Texas is close.
Mm-hmm.
And Notre Dame and Penn State are, they'd have to do some work because they're pretty much in the same place. Mm-hmm. And Clemson could retrieve their elite status.
Mm-hmm. Do you think they just have to win the ACC to retrieve it, or win the ACC and have 11-1 record? Do you think that gets them it, or do they have to do more?
So we're assuming the losses to Georgia, right?
Mm-hmm.
They lose to Georgia. They lose a competitive game. They run the table. They go 12-1 with an ACC championship. And what are they doing in the playoff?
Could make the top 4.
Okay, they're elite again. If they beat up on a bad ACC and go 11-1, 12-1, and Florida State's 9-3, and Miami's 8-4, that doesn't sell me.
Okay.
So I did a video a few years ago where I was looking at when is the last time every great program was either so for the programs that are now up, when was the last time they were down? And for the programs like Texas that are down or were at the time, when's the last time they were up? And how do you define that? And
Mm.
for me, I defined being down as, this doesn't apply to you since Notre Dame does not play in a conference, but I was defining down as, for 3 consecutive years, you are not competing for a conference championship, meaning on the final weekend of the season, you are not in the running for a conference championship. That was one of my criterias for being down.
That's fair. What do you say? I guess you can say the last time Notre Dame was down was 2016, the 4-8 year. I guess.
Well, yeah, that's a down year, but in 2015 they were
Yeah, that's
excellent,
fair.
and in 2017 that was they won in 2017. They beat LSU in a bowl game, right?
Beat LSU in the bowl game.
Yeah, that was at the 2017. Which one was that? Seems like they've played LSU in about 11
Yeah, that was
bowl
the
games.
Ian Book pass. Late.
Oh yeah. Yes, that was the Citrus Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, and they finished 11-2, right?
Lost to Stanford, Georgia, and Miami.
Okay, they went 10-3.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to me, they weren't down. The last time Notre Dame was down, in my opinion, was the end of Charlie Weiss's
Yeah,
tenure.
that's when I started watching, unfortunately. Bad time.
Yeah, that's the last time Notre Dame was down, in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan was just prior to Harbaugh. Ohio State was in the late
80s,
early 90s.
Mm-hmm. Georgia was down pretty much all the 90s.
Yeah.
Alabama,
LSU.
Really, Alabama was down in between stalling. Well, not down. But
yeah, when Mike Dubose took them over, they were still okay, but it only took a few years. Yeah, early 2000s, Mike Dubose, and then into the next two coaches, Alabama. Yeah. Florida State, obviously, very recently.
Pretty recent.
2016 to, or 2017 to 2 years ago.
I still don't understand the Taggart hire. But
I guess I would still consider USC. They're an interesting one because they keep popping up with some decent years.
That's tricky.
They obviously the last time they were elite was Pete Carroll, 2008, but they've had some really good teams since then.
Man,
they don't
when I was little, I knew I just want to see that 2008 USC team take on Florida. That would have been a fantastic.
Oh yeah, yeah. People bring up the 2007 season for good reason because it was chaotic at the end. But 2008, you had the championship game between Florida, Oklahoma, but you also had the USC variable and you had the Texas variable.
I mean, the thing with Texas that year is you compare Texas. I mean, I know Ohio State got better as the year went on, but Texas kind of struggled with Ohio State, and USC took it to them that year. But
yeah. But
obviously that Ohio State team, Terrell Pryor got better as the year went on.
Yeah, he was not the starting quarterback when they played USC. But just looking at what's fair, you've got 4 teams that went 11-1 or 12-1 in Florida's case, or in Oklahoma's case with the championship game. Yeah.
Yeah. If Notre Dame loses this A&M game, I'm going to be very upset. Just have to win. Have to win the tough road games. But we'll see. We'll see what happens this season.
Well, I think you've got an excellent team.
Yeah, just Mike. Yeah, just hopefully Mike Denbrock's offense is on it. against that A&M line, D
I
line.
think I put him preseason number 6.
Number
I think that
6.
was my call.
I've seen like 5 to 8 pretty much.
Yeah.
Per month, which is fair. But
Okay, Will. Anything else?
no, just thanks for having me on, Mark.
Of course. Good to see you, man.
Thank you.
Have a good night. All right. The real MVP's been hanging on forever. The real, good to hear from you. How you doing?
Good. How about you, Mark?
I'm doing just fine.
Now,
What
I
is
know
your-
Will was going about a bunch of random teams and stuff, and that's fine. But, Mark, can you help me explain this Florida State to the Big 12 rumor? How does this make any logical sense at all?
From what perspective, though?
The perspective Florida State wanted out of the ACC?
Yeah, it doesn't. It makes sense for the Big 12.
Obviously, if I was the Big 12, I would be doing backflips and everything humanly possible to
Yeah.
get Florida State.
Yeah, the only thing I can figure is that Florida State was so focused on we're being screwed in the ACC. How dare they? Why don't they give us preferential treatment and a larger distribution? And even if they do, it's not going to be enough. We need to get out of here. We're Florida State. There's a lot of conjecture here in this statement, but I don't know that they gave much thought to anyone turning them down, that they're Florida State. They may have
You're
even
telling me
thought
they've been snobby this whole time?
that we're gonna have our pick between the SEC and the Big Ten.
You thought Florida State thought themselves in higher regard than everybody else, despite what's been going on for them for the last 10 years? I can't believe this, Mark. You're just blowing my mind. Like, that's insane. Mark, honestly, I'm not trolling when I say this. Florida State would be more relevant if they went independent than if they go to the Big 12. Because at least if they went independent, they can play an Ohio State, a Georgia, an Alabama,
Yep.
something like that. You go Florida State, who are you going to play? Kansas State? Who's going to watch Florida State, Kansas State? Or Florida State, TCU, Florida State, Houston? Nobody's going to watch those games. Give me a break, Mark.
You are right. Nobody's gonna. Even Utah's a really good football game, but it doesn't really scream viewership. It's a good football game for people that love football and know how good the teams are. But yeah, that's not a brand that ESPN or ABC's throwing on TV to say, "Oh, look at us. We've got Florida State and Utah this week."
Right. I see one guy in the comments saying Florida State's not relevant enough as Notre Dame to get those type of games, Mark. Is Florida State relevant enough to play Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, those types of teams?
Oh, well, they certainly can get enough of those games. They would be able to put together a schedule, and I just really don't know. I guess the committee would just view them as they do Notre Dame. We're going to judge their record against their results and their performance and how well they played against this schedule. But it is kind of a tricky situation. It just kind of leaves them out in the middle of nowhere by themselves.
I guess that's better than being in the Big 12. My gosh, Mark. Think about it. I'm going to go from one tarnished brand, the ACC, to go to the Big 12. Honestly, you could go to the AAC and be just as equally relevant. Come on. This is blasphemy and lunacy.
You're exaggerating it quite a bit here. Notre Dame
I understand, but you get
Notre Dame. We've all grown up watching Notre Dame as an independent, and they've got the deal with NBC and that longtime partnership. I don't know what Florida State would be. Of course, networks would be interested in airing their games if they were able to put together a nice schedule, but I don't know how that would look in terms of, how do we value this schedule? It would probably be a very odd schedule, meaning that, I don't know if you remember BYU's schedules before they joined the Big 12. They would get really good games early in the season. They would play this murderer's row for about a month in September before everyone started playing in their conferences. And then by October and November, they're playing Wagner and Utah State, and they're just trying to piece together a schedule because everybody's playing their conference games. And so maybe Florida State, being a bigger brand, wouldn't have that much of an issue, but I'm sure that the ACC would be shutting them off and saying nobody from the ACC is going to play them. So don't look here for any games.
Mark, I've got two teams that are lost in the wilderness that need games. Okay, they're just lost. They've been lost. They've been in the forest for a while, and their names are Oregon State and Washington State.
Yes.
Okay, well, just play them. At least they're respectable. Play them in November. They're better than Utah State and Wagner.
Those two, yeah.
Play two of the more relevant teams out there in the nation. Play a little bit of the Big 12. Play another bend to bottom SEC team every year, and boom, there's your schedule. That's better than playing an entire Big 12 schedule.
But let's think of it this way. Florida State's in court right now with the ACC, and I don't believe in any way that they're going to be free of this court case to play outside the ACC in 2025. I do not believe, based on the intel that I get. So let's say they're gearing up for a 2026 season in which they're going to be independent. These conference schedules are locked in. Most of these opponents are locked in out of conference. Pretty much everybody's got their seasons pretty well mapped out in 2026.
I know. I don't, Mark, I've been on the train. I don't think Florida State's leaving the ACC for a while. I'm not one of these people. Like, I'm not sure if you saw Josh Pate made a video like a week or two ago about you can hear something in July, which is this month, Mark. I mean, to me, that's absolutely nonsense. Maybe he has an inside source or something. But from everything I understand about the situation, it's not going to happen.
No, we had a good discussion with Tony Siracusa here the other day and just posted that video. And yeah, when you really add up even the most ardent Florida State followers that follow these court proceedings know that they haven't even gotten to, they're still working through like jurisdiction type issues of where this court case is actually going to be held and all these things. They're still fighting over territory in terms of where they're going to actually hold the trial.
Right. I mean, think how long it's taken for some criminal trials. I'm not sure if you watch the news lately or anything, but a bunch of these criminal trials take like years for them to finally go to court. How would it take for a civil trial? You think the criminal trials would take precedent over the civil trials? This is going to take years and years, Mark, in my opinion. I'm not a lawyer or anything, but I just have common sense. So if a criminal case takes like 2 years to get to court, how long would a civil case take? Longer than that, I would assume, right?
Well, in a criminal trial, if it's unless it's cut and dry, let's say it's a very complicated situation and the criminal was extremely savvy and all of that, you're talking about a lot that has to be worked through in regards to DNA testing and all sorts of things, versus this is pretty much the ability to reason through a contract and how a contract reads and determine who's in the right and by how much are they in the right and who's in the wrong and how much they're going to have to give up in this settlement. Or it wouldn't be a settlement, this judgment.
Right. And all that
seems you're going to settle before that would be my guess.
I don't know. I think if I was the ACC, I would intentionally drag this out as long as humanly possible. And if Florida State wants to settle, I would make that cost them some things. Since they want to leave ASAP.
Yeah, well, it cannot be a cheap endeavor for either one of them. They are paying top level lawyers. They're not paying the guys that we see on TV $75 an hour to review our complaint against our landlord for the leaky roof kind of thing. So they're paying top dollar for the best attorneys that they can find So I don't know how that weighs in comparison to how much the ACC is making, keeping Florida State and Clemson in the conference.
Right, but for them to do all of this just to go to the Big 12. Feels like, it feels like a great trilogy movie, and then you figure out the ending is the worst possible scenario, kind of like Game of Thrones. I'm not sure if you've seen that, but the first 7 seasons I've heard were amazing, and then the 8th season completely ruined it. I mean, if Florida State go into the Big 12, I mean, they just go into the abyss market just completely forgotten about. I mean, you want to fast track your wave to irrelevance. How about everybody hates you in your former conference and never wants to play you ever again because you spit in their faces, basically, to join a lesser conference?
A lesser conference?
Yeah, a lesser conference. The ACC right now is better than the Big 12.
The ACC has more championship potential at the top.
Okay.
Yeah.
And their bottom is worse. I will give you their bottom is worse than the Big 12. But their middle is just a bunch of, I don't think it's middle. I think it's bottom, below average. And they got a lot of below average. These aren't really great top 25 teams we got here, Mark. I mean, if you look at ESPN's FPI, the best ranked team is Kansas. I mean, if Kansas is the best team in your FPI, I don't care what metric you use. If Kansas is your best team, you're a bad conference.
Yeah. So anyway, what the Big 12 is doing right now is doing everything they can to be relevant and to be a factor. So at least they're being creative and innovative in exploring ways to create revenue. They're doing much more than the ACC is.
Right. And what is that resulting in? In terms of factual things, they're still behind the ACC, right?
They have just announced these endeavors to get the private equity sum of money, which in the long run sounds like a bad deal. I'm no financier, but it sounds like you're wanting the big payoff up front, and you're going to have to forfeit half your, I'm exaggerating, 20% of your league down the road. You're going to get killed in revenue loss down the road to try to be relevant right now with this private equity situation that they're pursuing, plus the naming rights of the league. Somebody throws $1 billion at them, then Florida State's going to get that slice.
Right. And this is my opinion, Mark. Big 12 is going to get everybody else is going to realize how great of an idea is. They're going to take the idea and they're going to get more money from that same idea. I mean, these ideas isn't something just the Big 12 can do and only the Big 12 can do.
Yes, I'm well aware of that. I thought of the same thing. I just don't know if the Big 12 or the Big 10 and the SEC are going to at least contemplate it a little more and think, okay, we don't want to look as clownish as the Big 12. We'll see how well we can do it just with traditional revenue streams without, auctioning ourselves off. I could have used another term for just the almighty dollar in any conceivable way we can make, with crazy logos on our fields and patches on our jerseys and renaming our league. We don't even really own a league anymore. It's rented out to Allstate or somebody. It would have to get pretty bad for the Big 10 and the SEC, I think, to go that route. They would have to see, okay, well, the Big 12 is just buried in billions of dollars. So we need to go do the same thing because we'll make even more. If the Big 12 could charge X, Y, and Z, we can charge twice that.
Completely agree, Mark. And I wanted to go back to the original point just to emphasize it. Mark, if Florida State in 2023 was just randomly transported to the Big 12, okay? And let's remove Texas and Oklahoma for this thought experiment since that they're gone in the future. At 13-0, if they played, Jordan Travis went down and all that stuff, would they have gotten into the college football playoff ahead of the other 4 teams?
No.
So that's really the thing that just really dampens it. And I think everyone would agree on that. I mean, they're in the same spot regardless, so why go through all this hassle?
Well, they've already.
And if you're Clemson, Also, what's the benefit in doing all this?
Again, my first reaction is that they got themselves into a situation that they cannot recover from, and they overvalued themselves. And I don't even know if overvalue is the word. They overestimated the attraction that they were to the Big Ten and the SEC. Maybe this is all speculation we're talking about. Clemson could land in the SEC, and Florida State could be in the Big Ten in 3 years. It could still happen.
How much of the Big Ten you think not wanting FSU and Clemson involves the fact neither of those schools are AAU schools?
I would think that the Big Ten, first of all, would want someone else to come along with Florida State and them not just to be a solo venture. Florida State lines up in terms of its academic ranking, decently in the Big Ten. They're certainly not one of the better schools, but they're not at the bottom end from what we've seen in our rankings. And they were in the finals for the AAU accreditation. So you got to think that once they become aligned with the Big Ten, that would push them over the top.
Right, but they didn't get it. And they only give it out how much? Like, it's very rare they give out AAU membership, correct?
No, it's not that rare.
Okay, so you think it's likely to happen sooner than later? Like,
Yeah,
you think they could get it in the next 5 years?
So it's not a set determination, like every 4 years, this is what we do. They review it at whatever point that they feel as though things have changed, so it needs to be reviewed again. So I looked this up at one time, and the intervals of this review process were very sporadic. It wasn't like every 4 years. It was one time, and then it was 7 years later, and then it was 2 years later, then it was 9 years later, and then it's whenever they deem it worthwhile to review.
Okay. I mean, that makes some amount of sense, I guess. But the final thing I'll ask you, Mark, if Notre Dame called the Big Ten and say, tomorrow we'll go to you, but nobody else can be added, do you think they would do that?
Yes.
I think so, too. Notre Dame is clearly the best option, right?
Yes.
And if they added just Notre Dame, would they be better than the SEC?
Boy, that'd be a heck of a debate. And I'm going to say yes, but tentatively.
Okay, and final thing I'll say is I heard Nick talk about the Ohio State-Michigan game.
Yeah.
Mark, I'm going to go on record. I don't care who wins that game. It's one of the most irrelevant. I'm serious. It's one of the most irrelevant games going forward because both teams will probably make the playoff going forward. So who cares if you win that game? If I was the head coach, I'm not trolling. I would rest every player.
If they arrive at the game in the condition that you believe they are, let's say they're 11-0, 10-1, then you would rest the players.
I would treat it like week 18 in the NFL when you're 13-4 and you got your seed locked up. Why play them? It literally is a meaningless game at that point. Nothing is on the line.
But if you lose that game and then you go to the Big Ten championship game and lose again, then that suddenly has become the loss, meaning against Michigan or Ohio State, that has knocked you out of the playoff.
At 10-1, that's possible. At 11-0, I don't think that's possible.
Sure, true. Yeah. You go to the championship game and lose, you're 11-2, you're in the playoffs still. Yeah.
And if you're 10-1 and you go to 10, in my opinion, if you make it to your conference championship game, you shouldn't be eliminated from the playoff based on losing the conference championship game. Because if you're 10-2, you lost to Ohio State, lost to another really good team in the conference championship game, you shouldn't be leapfrog over teams that didn't play the week before.
Well, that is one of the points that I've brought up many times concerning how is this committee going to view conference championship games going forward? Because if we take their approach to the rankings, they have penalized teams for losing conference championship games. And many times that takes them from a 10-2 team that would be theoretically in the playoff to a 10-3 team that would miss the playoff.
Right, but how many of those times between those teams has it involved the SEC or the Big Ten?
Many times.
Okay, I didn't know if it was just the ACC and the Big 12 because those are scraps, Mark. I mean,
but again, my point is also, though, not that they may look at it differently, thinking, okay, it doesn't matter that Wisconsin just lost the Big Ten championship game and we're going to drop them from 11 to 15. Versus now it matters whether they're 11 or 15. So we're going to take more care in this ranking, and maybe we will cut them a break. I don't know. They could.
Right. And for all the people who believe the bye is why they would play the game, why would I play for a bye if I rest my players, they're getting a bye that week. And if they lose and get kicked out of the conference championship game, they get another whole week off. So you're basically getting 2 weeks off instead of 1.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. You're right. I've brought up the scenarios in which that game is going to be meaningless. I've done that as well. And I will say this, and Michigan fans aren't going to like it. And I'm not saying, I got to be very clear. I'm not saying this will be the case in the future. I'm just saying they just had a coaching change. And other than Jim Harbaugh, we have seen under the 2 previous coaches for sure, and even at the end of the Lloyd Carr era, that this has not been an elite program under those other coaches. So I'm just saying, Ohio State has proven coach after coach after coach after coach that they're going to continue to churn out 11-1 seasons. Michigan has not done that.
Okay, that'll take me to my next point. If Michigan's 10-2, Ohio State, or 10-2, Ohio State's 11-0, and Ohio State has the chance to knock Michigan out from the playoffs. Do you think that's a reason Ohio State would play all their starters just to knock them out?
I think Ohio State's going to play all of its starters, and Michigan's going to play all of its starters because it is the game and their fans will demand it.
Well, Mark, that's why, and that's the difference between my conference, or the conference I root for, and your conference. You care about fighting each other, and we care about the holistic picture. We help.
Right. And we may be having this conversation in 10 years, and I may agree with you because it's diminished that much over time that in 10 years, it's simply, okay, yeah, it has all this tradition, blah, blah, blah. And if it's meaningful this season, we'll add all the tradition to it and go through all the pageantry and everything. But if not, we'll go through all that pageantry, but we'll sit our starters and treat it like an exhibition game because that's the practical thing to do with the higher goal of winning a national championship. But I don't think it's going to be treated like that initially. But we could get there.
Right. I don't think so initially. I don't think the playoffs are going to be viewed how they should be initially, but give it 4 or 5 years, and I think it's going to,
Yep.
Ohio State, if they go not to the semifinals, is a complete failure. But I think if they lose in the second round, they'll be fine with it now. Or they won't fire Ryan Day because of it now, even though I think they should, for example. Because if you lose in the second round, you're losing to a Tennessee-level team, and that's kind of embarrassing. So,
I think Ohio State. I think Ryan Day could get fired this year in a second round playoff loss, unless they just have an extraordinary regular season. Like if they're undefeated, they beat Michigan, they win the Big Ten championship, and then they lose their first playoff game, which was a second round game. I don't think he gets fired. not for going undefeated and winning the Big Ten championship, beating Michigan, and then having one bad game, even though that would be a horrendous end to the season and huge disappointment. I don't think he's going to get fired. He's going to be 13-1. All right, Daryl.
Yeah, that's all I got for you, Mark. Anyway, good seeing you and talking to you.
Thanks, Daryl. All right, let's take our final call. We're working on 3 hours here, folks, but so we do appreciate all this, and I have not read these super chats, so we will get through these, and we'll take Porter here. Nick says Notre Dame would not even have a football team without Michigan. And thank you so much, Blue Wolverine. Mark, if you don't want that ugly winged helmet, I have a home for it. Well, we have all the helmets that people sent us. So I bought the first handful, and then the rest of them were sent. And then I cut off the P.O. box, so nobody's been sending helmets for a couple of years now. So that's the deal there. But yes, it's not worth the time or effort to transport helmets. Okay, we've got John Teal. Retro Air Jordans are iconic, but plenty of people prefer retro Reebok pumps. I think that guy just has a need to be right. We get your point. Yeah, things can be iconic, and reasonable people can think that they just don't like them, whether it's, again, a song, a musical band, a type of recipe. All these different things can be iconic, and you cannot like them. Are tuxedos iconic? Do I want to wear one? No. All sorts of things. Okay. We've got Ace Fest. Clemson would lose money going to the Big 12 based on extra travel costs. People bring this up all the time about travel costs. I think this might be a little bit overstated. They're traveling to Boston College and Syracuse. Yeah, there would be extra travel costs, no doubt. There is not enough difference between what they get in the ACC compared to the Big 12. Well, we shall see if that, in fact, will be the case. There is a lot of talk out there about Clemson going to the Big 12. I would have told you weeks ago, nah, I don't see that happening. Now I'm less sure that it will not happen. We do know this. Most of what we hear out there will not, most of it is irrelevant. It's not substantiated. It's just garbage. It's trash. It's not worth listening to. Now, I don't know exactly what that is and what it's not. That's why I take the approach that I do. I post the videos where I line up candidates based on the criteria, and I do the videos, and I take the approach that I do, and I don't grovel in the hearsay and all of that business, because we could take part in that and just talk about, well, Clemson's being talked about. But when you really dig into it and you go online, as I did this afternoon, site after site after site after site that have these headlines that make it read like, oh, wow, they really got something here. Who did they talk to? And they're just regurgitating what they said, and they're regurgitating the other way. So you just got this cross, and since they're all talking about it, well, all these sources are talking about it, and it's all over the social media. Well, you're part of the problem in creating this loop of just never-ending rumor. Okay. John Till, 10 million for conference championships. They'll play them. I think that's a bigger discussion to be had, but I get your point. Last call goes to Porter. Porter, how you doing?
Good evening. Well, let me touch real quick on the original topic.
Yeah.
Thank you to my friend LFG in the chat who let me know what the original topic was. The winged helmet is the greatest helmet of all time.
That's the original. Well, that is not our original topic, but go right ahead. It's a topic.
Okay.
No, we were talking realignment, but
and this is a boy.
And blue bloods. Then we were talking blue bloods. Those were the two topics of the show.
I mean, keep in mind, I was raised in Atlanta, Georgia, and when you're watching ABC college football with Keith Jackson and you're watching a game from the big house, and you see that helmet, it catches your eye when you're that young, and you're watching. I think I told you this before. I was not the first superstar I ever saw in college football was not Charles White. It was not Billy Sims. It was Anthony Carter for Michigan, and that number 1 jersey and those long white socks and those. I mean, the guy was just unbelievable. And then to have that Michigan helmet, I mean that was the best. That was the most, I guess, sharp looking uniform that you could see at that time. And so yeah, as a Georgia graduate and someone who grew up in the South, to me, that I'm definitely unbiased in my opinion that the Michigan helmet is the best helmet in college football.
Okay.
You know. I know you're raised an Ohio State fan, but I mean, the Ohio State is a great helmet too.
Well, I don't care. Like if we took of course, well, I think I am in the same category as most college football fans that you think your team's gear is the best. I do, but I'm biased. So I, unlike most of the people that call and are in the chat, admit to being biased. I don't know how many. Here's a good example. Every show we did this week, or maybe in the last 2 weeks, on the various team channels, we brought up the EA Sports rankings of players and the Phil Steele rankings of units. We didn't have one show where that particular person, even though they are a professional of sorts, they are representing that team, where they didn't think that USC, you fill in the blank, Miami, Florida State, Michigan, all of them, that they are being ranked too low. Well, that's obviously a completely, when it just over and over and over lines up with you cover that team and you think that they're being ranked too low. Well, that's obvious bias across the board.
Yep, probably.
But I admit to it. I don't like Michigan's helmets. I hate them. But
well, speaking of which, I mean, I will say this. I'll give a shout out to this guy. I would say, I don't know if you keep up with this guy much on social media or whatever, but Andy Staples went to Florida, and that guy is about as unbiased a guy as I've ever seen. That guy can badmouth his Gators and talk great about Georgia and talk great about all these other.
It's kind of easy to take that viewpoint here in the last 5 years.
I know, but I mean, he is definitely not a defender of Florida, but he went there. But that's just a guy that I think. Cole Kubelik's another one that I think is very unbiased, even though he went to Auburn. But you said something. I don't want to keep you on here too long, but you said something with Jarrell. By the way, Jarrell, shout out to him. I mean, the guy, he every time he does such a good job of generating, ginning up topics. I listen to him while I'm on hold, and I'm like, well, I want to touch on that, but no, I want to touch on that, but no, I want to touch on that. The guy brings up so many good topics. I didn't know which way to go by the time he hung up, but I will say I have to go this way. Mark, I like you, man. I mean, you're very, I think you and I agree on a lot of things, but for you to say that the Big Ten, by adding Notre Dame, would be the #1 football conference.
Yeah, I don't think you really listened to my statement.
Isn't that what you said?
I said it would be too close to call, and you're asking me. So I don't like to make calls on those sorts of things unless I do my homework. Number one. So I think they might be, maybe not. I'd have to sit down and really analyze it. I think the Big Ten could be a better conference this season. We'll see.
Well, I mean,
even without Notre Dame.
Just based on what has happened from the BCS era through the college football playoff era, I can name 8 programs in the SEC that have won national championships, starting with the BCS.
But you just brought up Florida a second ago, Porter. They're nothing right now. We're not talking about what happened 20 years ago. I'm not talking about historical reference points to build up a resume. I'm talking about what's going to happen in the future.
Well, I understand that, but do you really think that Florida and Auburn and teams like that are going to stay down forever?
Not forever.
And they haven't. So my point is, I can name 8 programs that have won national championships, starting with the BCS era and starting in 1998, all the way through the college football playoff. No other conference has that much variety of teams that have won a national championship. In fact, it's not even close. I think if you add it by you adding the Pac 6 or whatever to the Big Ten, I think you only come up with maybe five programs that have won national championships. I'm coming with 8. So
okay, so you don't think that Oregon is a better football program right now than Tennessee? Florida?
Where do you place Oregon in the pecking order?
I think Oregon's one of the 6 or 7 best programs in the country right now. We're talking about right now and projecting what's going to happen in the future.
So if you say they're top 6, that means they're what, number 2 or 3 in the Big Ten?
I think Oregon is the 3rd best program right now in the Big Ten.
So who's the 3rd best program in the SEC?
I
Texas?
guess Texas is.
So you don't think so? I guess my point is we got a deeper bench right now, even with certain programs being down.
Yeah, you've got a deeper bench. Yeah.
So I guess that's my point. I don't think there's really a debate right now. I mean, the SEC is so much far ahead, especially when
there's a debate.
Especially when you take 2 of your top 4 teams in the Big Ten last year went and got beat by Missouri and Ole Miss. When you see Ohio State and Penn State get beat by teams that aren't necessarily elite teams of the SEC, go play them in major bowl games, and lose. So
yeah, with very compromised teams.
Anyway, you and I aren't going to agree on that, but I will say this. Okay, keep that in mind.
I've been sitting here the entire offseason touting the SEC is still the best conference in college football. So I don't know what we're arguing about.
Well, I guess a program like Notre Dame that, even with their history, has not won a national championship since 1988. I don't think it adds a whole
93. Lot. There's a national championship.
Okay.
Yeah, Luke. I don't give in to morons that don't know what they're doing. Like if history is written incorrectly, then it's written incorrectly. So to me, Notre Dame won a national championship in 1993.
I don't disagree with you. I think the problem with you awarding them a national championship is they lost to Boston College, which I don't even know Boston College finished ranked that year.
They went 9-3 and finished number 13 in the country. They were a good team.
Okay. All right. Okay. I stand corrected. So,
but still, you had 2 teams that had like resumes, and one of them won the game head to head.
So you think it should have been like 78 when Southern Cal beats Bama, but Bama still gets a share of the national championship? Is that kind of what you're saying?
I think that almost every national championship pre-BCS is screwed up.
Yeah. Well, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but keep in mind what I just said about all the brands in the SEC. I don't think we need to add another big college football brand to the SEC. Let me throw this idea out at you. I heard this from a guy, Huntsville radio guy, big Bama guy. I thought it was brilliant when I heard it. And he said, this is what Sankey should do. And after I heard it, I was like, that's absolutely brilliant. He said, if I were Sankey, I wouldn't go out and get another big football brand. He said, I would go up to North Carolina and get Duke and North Carolina. Those are the 2 brands that I would get and bring them into the SEC. Because you think about it, the only sport that the SEC is not the best conference at is college basketball. We're the best conference in football, baseball, definitely. If you haven't kept up with the College World Series the last 4 or 5 years, women's basketball, heck, Auburn even won the national championship in golf this year. We dominate all the sports except for college basketball. You go up to the Triangle and you get North Carolina and Duke. I mean, it's game over, man.
There you go.
I mean, you think about it. Duke, Carolina. I mean, that is just such. I mean, those are two huge brands in college basketball. It's like going. It's like they're like the equivalent of the Yankees and Red Sox in baseball. It's like, ESPN can't promote that stuff enough. Every time the Red Sox and the Yankees play, they got to promote it. Every time Duke, Carolina play, they got to promote it. But they're huge brands. So we don't need to add another college football power in the SEC.
Part of my response, Porter, is that I've been on for 3 hours, so I have little response to really anything at this point. So, yes, add Duke and North Carolina. Excellent. Sure. Yeah.
All right. We'll let you go.
Thanks, Porter. I appreciate you being here.
All right, man. Bye.
I believe we have caught all of the super chats, so we appreciate everyone being here. We've got Houston Cougars, German. So I love this. Houston fans, Houston Cougar fans, like to see more of this. Thank you so much for the contribution there. Great content. Go Cougs. So along the realignment lines, now that this is out there, we're going to continue with our realignment week. And we've got certainly this number of formats and models that we've thrown out for the Big Ten and the ACC, and gave a survival plan to the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC. And now maybe we'll dive into a Florida State Clemson model for the Big 12 and see what that could possibly look like. All right, folks. But once again, 2 years ago, I don't think I still have it here. Yes, I do. 2 years ago, I'm throwing out Oregon, Washington, Stanford. I did put Cal in there as and we've got to remember that there is a component there about a brand as big as Notre Dame, because we saw it with USC, bringing another brand with them that may be tainted. So USC, UCLA benefited from being attached to USC. Maybe, like Porter was talking about, maybe Duke latches on to North Carolina, and they go to either the SEC or the Big Ten. The Big Ten could be a destination for North Carolina and Duke. I'm sure NC State is trying to vie for that position to attach themselves to North Carolina, because North Carolina is in good shape. They can go pretty much where they want. They are going to be coveted, I believe, by both the SEC and the Big Ten. So North Carolina is in a great position, even more so based on a lot of factors than Miami. And North Carolina is a state that both the SEC and the Big Ten, I believe, want to get into and stake their claim, because North Carolina now is, with the demise of the ACC, somewhat wide open. And of course, North Carolina is that land grant flagship school. All right, folks, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Next up on our network, they've probably started by now. Yeah, we got the USC show going on with Tim and Matt right now. It's the call-in show over on the USC channel going on right now. We are going to have a programming update that's going to come out that is going to line up all that we've got in store for the upcoming 2024 college football season. And thanks again for all that you do and for being here at the Voice of College Football. And we will see you soon.